Mr. Reeves, when you're ready for streaming, please.
Can I?
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Western Area Planning Committee meeting. The meeting was opened in the chamber and that was adjourned, and now we restarted the meeting at 6:32 or thereabouts, and we will now take the Western Area Committee meeting forward. My name is Clive Hooker. I'm chairman of this committee, and the members of the committee joining me this evening are councillors Adrian Abbs, Lynn Doherty, who's substituting for Dennis Pennyworth, Jeff Beck, Phil Barnett, Jeff Cant, Caroline Culver, James Cole, and Tony Vickers, our chairman. I think I've covered everybody this evening. The officers attending and presenting the application this evening in the committee are our planning officers, Bob Gray and Jack Brown, our highways officer, Paul Goddard. My legal advisor this evening is Sharon Armour, and the clerk will be Jack Karimi. And I'm also assisted by Lindsay Reeve, who will be the meeting Zoom host. Before we start the meeting, I'd like to explain for the benefit of those watching that this is held both by Zoom and with councillors here in the Roger Croft room. The meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube so that the public are able to follow the proceedings. Please can I ask everyone present in the meeting to make sure they switch on their microphones when invited to speak. And we don't have any microphones, I see this evening. You speak up because there is a microphone in the ceiling, and to please turn your mobile phones off and also turn the sound on your laptops off. Regarding the safety of the meeting this evening, if we hear the fire alarm, we must leave the building immediately. Please leave via the safe emergency exit, which will be shown to us by the officers present. Please follow any instructions given by those officers. The assembly point will be in the Dolphin car park store below. If the lockdown alarm sounds, please remain in your seats and await instructions again from the officers. I will then adjourn the meeting and restart it when it's safe to proceed. To be consistent with our council meetings, I'd like to remind members that we are subject to the council's code of conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, those being respectful to each other and to officers and members of the public present. Members may not always agree with one another or with the officers' recommendations, but I would ask that in any disagreement, we are always respectful of other persons' views and recommendations and position. So that concludes the instructions for this evening. Now move on to the first item of the agenda, which is apologies. Mr. Green.
We received apologies from Councillor Dennis and Councillor James Cole and no doctor are there as a
Thank you very much. Item 2 is the minutes. If you remember, members, I think we agreed the minutes of the meeting of the 23rd of November, and I have just signed those earlier. There was no comments on those, so we'll move on to the meeting of the 18th of January. You've got those minutes, members. Any observations on those? Councillor Callback.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, point 22 on page 10, where we talked about discussing ecology reports. It says Councillor Culver expressed surprise that it would be necessary to have a parliamentary discussion over biodiversity. I expressed surprise that it was possible to have such a discussion, not that it was necessary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That will be noted.
Thank you.
Any other observations? Councillor Beck?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Taking into account the my fellow councillor, I would like to propose that we accept these written minutes as a true record of what took place.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. Councillor Camp. All those in favour? Raise your hand. One abstention. Councillor Cole. And Councillor Dock. Thank you very much. Therefore, I will sign those minutes. Members, item 3 on the agenda is declaration of interest. Councillor Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say that I've been lobbied on both items, and item 1 actually relates to my ward, but I will make my decision this evening based on the discussions that we have in the paperwork in front of us.
Thank you. Councillor Beck.
Thank you, Chairman. I wish to record that I have been lobbied on item 2 of the Glanmore and Woodlands application.
Thank you. Members.
Yeah, I need to declare that I've been lobbied extensively by in writing and so on, to the point where the applicant even was insisting I hand over details of other members of the committee so they could be contacted, which I'd like noted. And I know maybe Simpson saying that's highly inappropriate to ask one councillor for the details of another, just so they could lobby.
And this is on which?
Oh, sorry, Walker's Logistics.
Walker, thank you. Councillor Cole.
I have also been lobbied by Walker Logistics.
Councillor Little.
Well, I've been lobbied by both sides on that item.
Likewise, Chairman, and also can I just ask through you, Chairman, in the corner here, this is not a good room for transmitting speeches. It would be nice if people can just speak a bit louder in this corner.
I'd just like to repeat the lobbying I received as well on that application of my colleagues.
Thank you. And I also been lobbied on the second application by both the supporters, applicant, the applicant and objectors. So I'll make that clear as well. But with no preconceived decision on this, and I wait for different place this evening to see where this one goes. Thank you very much. So item 4, we do come on to the applications. We have 2 this evening. First application is 20/01336. This is at the Institute of Animal Health at High Street, Compton. And the second application is 22/00897. This is the land south of the Tower Works, Lambourne Woodlands at Hungerford. So as an introduction for those people in attendance this evening or watching online and unfamiliar with these meetings, I'll just briefly outline the process for each application. The officers who I introduced earlier will present the application to the committee. The drawing, site plans and any deemed relevant materials submitted on the planning file will be shown as part of their presentation, and they will appear on the screen here and also on your tablets and laptops at home. I will then invite the representatives from the following groups to come up to the table in front of us, and I will ask Ms. Reeves, if needed, to invite those in by Zoom if they're not present in the chamber. Each group will have a total of 5 minutes to speak, and the order of the presentations will be: first up, the Parish Council, second, any objectors, third, I will call the supporters, and fourth, the applicant or the agent. On conclusion of each of those submissions, I will ask members of the committee if they have any questions or clarification on that submission. Members of the committee will not be permitted to introduce new subject matter as part of their question. Then I'll invite the ward member to speak. He will also have, or she will also have, 5 minutes to present their case. Committee members may then, on conclusion of that presentation, ask questions for clarification. Committee members will then have the opportunity to ask questions of the officers' presentation. The committee will then debate the application and a vote will be taken on a decision. So everybody quite clear what we're doing this evening. So we come on to our first application this evening, which is the Animal Institute, High Street at Compton, that's 20/01336. And I think this is the finalisation of the S106 agreement and the confirmation of ownership of a small area of land. And this comes to committee due to the revision and consultation on ownership certificates. I'll ask Mrs. Lader, please, to give a presentation on this application. Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application is hybrid, partly outlined with all matters except access to the 160 dwellings and associated works, as well as 1.75 hectares of employment land, including retention of the Intervet building and the playing field cricket pitch. It is also partly full for demolition of all but 3 buildings, being the Intervet building, the gatehouse, and what was the nursery building proposed for community use. Earthwork and remediation works along with the change of use of land for public open space and wildlife areas. This committee reached a resolution on the application last February. This committee has previously considered the proposal. I will focus on the land use plan, which is on the screen. But I have all plans available, can answer questions and show those plans if you consider it necessary. So the yellow areas would be the housing development. E1 to the north is the retained employment land for Intervet, which is existing. A1 is for future employment development. The lighter blue and the orange areas towards the south are the retained buildings and associated land for community use. And the green areas are the open space and wildlife areas. The site is an allocated housing site. As the report sets out, the Section 106 agreement has been negotiated and is ready for completion, but a check on land registry titles found a small area of unregistered land at an access on Churn Road, which I hopefully show access drawings. So it is the the third one across, just this area in the bell mouth here. It's unregistered. So notices and a consultation on updated ownership certificates have been carried out. Comments received are summarised in the reports and the update sheet. The update sheet considers the new representation from the GP surgery and sets out that no funding has been sought by them or the CCP, and it's considered by officers that the test for a Section 106 on that matter has not been met. The main report and update sheet outlines proposed minor changes to some of the conditions, both including the changes made by committee and to clarify when details are required for the outline and full parts of the application. The committee are asked to confirm that the land ownership matter being addressed and there being no changes to the proposal, that permission be granted subject to the amended conditions in Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Mather. We now come on to the presentations of our attendees this evening. We have a new one from our council at Compton. No objectors, no submorters, but we do have Mr. Mike Harris from Home England. Mr. Harris, are you with us speaking, sir?
He's on Zoom.
He's on Zoom. Thank you. Mr. Reeves, if you could let Mr. Harris in, please.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Good evening, Mr. Harris. We can.
Hi.
We can see you.
Good, fantastic.
I'll just give you a little bit of instruction first. As you may well be aware, you're addressing the Western Area Planning Committee this evening. You have 5 minutes in total. I will give you a warning at 4 minutes, and then with 20 seconds I'll go. I'll say, and in conclusion, if you could just wind up your presentation, should you need the full 5 minutes. So when you're ready, I'll start the clock. We've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the committee and Mrs. Mather for the presentation. I don't intend to say a huge amount, if I'm honest. The revision in front of you is simply related to the issue relating to unregistered land, which came up on the Section 106. It's obviously 12 months nearly to the day that we received your resolution, but which feels like a long time, but we've been working really, really hard with your officer team and your legal team, really, really positive discussions. And hopefully we've got to a place where the Section 106 agreement is in a really good place. Our secretariat have signed it, so it's in your building. It's in a good place. It addresses everything that you asked us to consider last time, particularly around the community building and the commuted sum. I understand there was a question possibly earlier in the week or last week around indexation. Can confirm that's dealt with within the agreement. Similarly with the conditions, worked really, really well with officers to make sure that we're in a position that the conditions work for what is a difficult site. I think we all know that there are two main phases. There's the clean up, and then there's the future development, and making sure that conditions work well for that. But crucially, I think making sure that they protect yourselves, officers, and the community ultimately in terms of the end development. So that a lot of that is around design and engagement with the community on design and building for healthy life, commitments and design coding. So that's all in there. So that restates our previous commitment on those points. I don't really think there's a huge amount more to say other than I hope that you're satisfied tonight that the issues have been addressed and that we can see the resolution stand and hopefully move forward and see the site cleaned up and providing much needed housing and much needed affordable housing and first homes for the community. So happy to take questions. I would say, given I've got the time, the sound quality isn't great for those of us online either. It's a little bit echoey, but we'll work with it.
Okay.
Happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. Members, any questions? Hands up, please. Nobody on my left, nobody on my right. Just please take note. I've been in these situations before, and one needs to direct our voice up to the microphone, which is in the ceiling. Otherwise, it's not good. Is it better if we speak up and look up, Mr. Harris?
That's much better. I mean, it doesn't help that I'm hard of hearing anyway. So it could just be me, to be honest.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
We now move on to our ward member, Councillor. There are no questions. There were no questions from the members. I did ask, yeah, no questions. Thank you for that, Ms. Armour. Councillor Corber.
Thank you,
I'm
Chair.
quite happy for you to take it from the chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. I haven't got many comments to make.
I'll just you well, so I will start you now.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to learn from the applicant that the section 106 is now in our building, as he said, and I look forward to finding out more about that from officers. I don't have any comments to make about the ownership certificate, but I just wanted to very briefly comment, Chairman, if I can, on the feedback that we got from the Down and Practice surgery, and just put on the record my disappointment as ward member that they didn't take the opportunity to respond previously. I do know that they are able to apply for infrastructure funds from the NHS until 3 years, but I think it would have been appropriate for them to have taken the opportunity to make a submission when we were discussing this a year ago. The residents of Compton and the surrounding villages are really, really concerned about the provision that there is there. The Down and Practice in Cheveley has got a small practice in Compton, and the residents are very much reliant on that and very, very concerned about the increased pressure that's going to be on that facility in the future. So the fact that the CCG and the doctor's surgery have left it until this very, very late stage to comment, I think is extremely disappointing. And I just want to express my concern about what impact that might have on the community in the future. And that's all I'd like to say, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any question of Councillor Corber? Maybe you could just remind the members of the response from the surgery, please.
Yes, well, on the document here, yeah, so it said additional funding would be needed to provide the service required for additional patients of the new development. So that's what the Down and Practice surgery have said on this particular item that we're considering tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me take note of that. Thank you very much. That's all our presenters this evening. It now comes around members to ask any questions of Mrs. Mather's presentation. Do we have any questions? We do. Councillor Murphy, thank you.
To be honest, I can't see any difference in the drawings that we've got in front of us. So,
No.
it's a real puzzle why we're having this meeting at all, actually.
It's,
Can you elaborate what, in words if necessary, what's changed?
so there's no change to the plans. They're exactly the same as they were before you last time. The issue is around the ownership certificates. That there was that parcel of land which was unregistered, so the correct notices need to be served. So that having been addressed, it's before you again to
Reaffirm the
reaffirm.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
presentation of the plan was almost a distraction rather than a help.
Well, I was wanting to remind you, it's been a while that that's what's in front of you.
Right. Yeah, I'm often reminded that it's actually owning the land is because it's not you making a planning application on that land. Well, I'm kind of with Councillor Vickers as to just because there's a land ownership question mark.
It being one of the aspects of getting the in and out, right away.
It's a technicality. You have to, when you make a planning application, you're right, you can make an application for any piece of land. If you don't own it, you have to serve notice on it. The way the legislation is written is plan entertaining application until the correct notice has been served. So these detailed slivers of land have come up as part of the section
So
1.
you're informing us the correct analysis.
Yeah. We've had to redo the consultation, and obviously that's raised and have responses to that. So
Okay.
it's in no short terms a technicality in that respect.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank Ms Laver for dealing with the conditions, because the initial pack had 2 separate in, and we're very, very keen to make sure we have the correct ones in front of us. Just to ask officers, when do they anticipate that the section 106 document would be available for the ward members to look at?
Yeah,
I don't know how long
I
completed.
wasn't aware we had it yet, I've got to say.
Yeah,
So,
it's executed, it's just not completed.
I
It's
am.
not executed, it's engrossed, is that the right terminology?
Yeah,
Yes,
so but it's been, we've got it back from them signed,
yes,
okay, and we're waiting to sign it and then complete it.
yes.
So I guess Thursday's a sealing day, so it could potentially be done tomorrow and then be completed tomorrow.
Okay, so are you able to share something with me to have a look at? I'm happy to look at it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? No, all done. Open it up for debate. Anybody, anything they wish to say on this? Otherwise, we'll go, I think, straight to a vote. So I don't think there's anything for us to add or consider legally or in planning terms. I think it's quite straightforward and we're quite happy with it. So members, I'm seeking your confirmation here that the application can proceed in accordance with the previous resolution of the Western Area Planning Committee, subject to the updated conditions of this application. Yeah, proposal. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Alison, second by Councillor Cole. Updated conditions in this application at the Animal Institute, High Street at Compton. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. So that is passed in that application there. Thank you very much. So we now move on to. Yes. Yes. So what we've got now is a safety issue with numbers of people we can actually keep in this room.
Is it possible if they're not registered to speak, that I can help you out with people who are, if that's okay?
Why?
Well, Mr. Pearce, Mr. Poppinger and Mr. King.
We're not allowed in then, is that what you're saying?
It's a room capacity issue.
Well, we can move over.
It's being transmitted as this application is they are set outside for safety reasons. It's on the screen in the foyer.
Excuse me.
So you can watch that in the foyer.
You're registered to speak.
You're registered to speak.
Yeah, so you're everyone that's registered to speak. So the intention was, because there's a health and safety issue about the numbers in the room, that those that are registered to speak will stay. Everyone else will listen in the room next door, and they'll be able to see exactly what's happening. So they'll be next door.
But I suppose we had a right.
Chairman, point of information, Chairman. Through you to Chairman. What is actually the recognised number for fire rate?
Chairs that we've got in the room.
Okay.
25, I understand.
Well, if someone understands it, will only be one person coming in, won't it?
I've been advised on safety grounds that the number of people you can have.
I think what I would say to you is, what do you think your disadvantage is from listening to it next door to actually being in here? Since you're not
It's a big disadvantage, but
what can you
I've been on
articulate?
Zoom before, it's very difficult to
Yeah.
understand what was the conversation and listening to the comments.
Especially when they're
It's quite a big
quietly.
debate. We spent quite a bit of time trying to come here. There are 2 spare chairs, 3 spare chairs here. So I don't understand why they.
And why
couldn't
can't
use them.
one wait if he's talking outside?
No, they should come in. They should come in too. But I mean, the 3 empty chairs could be used presumably for those people outside.
I understand that the capacity is 25, so I don't know how many, have you put 25 chairs?
I don't get 25 here.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Very important situation for us as well.
I can't proceed until you leave, I'm afraid, so I'm terribly sorry.
Well, the other alternative is you stand at the door.
Okay.
Would you want to stand at the door?
It's such an important thing.
But that's what, would you like to, that's why I'm asking you to articulate your disadvantages. So that we can assess it.
I'll take advice.
But then are we allowed?
I'm totally in the hands of the office of the government.
No, I thought. Within your safety guidelines, is the spare, if you have the elements that are not seized, could we use them, please?
In safety.
Yes. Yes, thank you. That's lovely. I think that's common sense, isn't it, really? There's one there, and there's one chair there. Not good. Thank you very much. No, we want to involve everybody. We're on to shut people out.
Just,
That's down. I'll stand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
how many we have?
Thank you very much.
I'll stand here. Yeah,
I'm a bit worried about you.
oh, don't worry about me. I'm very. Stand.
There's a spare chair here. Chair there, I don't know how many are coming in and speaking. I mean, we've got 5 coming in, of which 2 aren't speaking.
No, that's three. No, just three. Three that are speaking.
3 are speaking. So we could accommodate the 3 that are speaking, and I'll appreciate the 2 that are attending and not speaking.
No, that
But
was
here's the questions. If you could just stand at the floor, I'd appreciate it. So the 3 speakers, that is, we've got the Walker, yeah.
Okay, their team stay together.
Elizabeth Darbell and Mr. Carswell. Right, are we all comfortable? We're all happy. Thank you. Rachel, there's a spare chair.
Yeah, if there's,
I think spare chair.
if there's a spare chair, I
Thank
think.
you.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
It's via-
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Are we all composed? Deep breaths. Right. We'll move on now to the second application before the committee this evening, which is this application 22/00897. This is reserved matters at the land south of the Tower Works at Lambourne Woodlands. This is the approval of reserved matters following the outline application 19/02979 for the erection of new logistics warehouse building for the occupation by Walker Logistics, which is a Class D8 building with ancillary office floor space, an aircraft museum building Class D1, and associated access, car parking, landscaping. Members, please concentrate. The matters to be considered this evening are access, appearance, landscaping, and layout. And this has come to this committee due to more than 10 letters of objection, and Mr. Brown will present this application to us. Mr. Brown, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just share my screen, so please bear with me. This application seeks approval of reserved matters following the outline planning permission granted for the erection of a new logistics warehouse building with ancillary office floor space, an aircraft museum building, and associated access, car parking, and landscaping. The reserved matters to be considered under this application relate to access, appearance, landscaping, and layout only. This application has been brought to committee for determination as it has received more than 10 representations objecting to the application and is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions proposed in section 8 of the agenda report and the amended condition detailed in the update report. The principle of the development proposed, traffic impact and scale of the development is considered and accepted at the outline stage and is not for consideration in the determination of this reserved matters application. An EIA screening opinion following the submission of this application has been issued by the council, confirming that the development proposed is not EIA development within the meaning of the EIA regulations. Site notices were erected at the site along Ramsbury Road, and the application was also advertised in the Weekly News. During the consideration of the application, 2 packages of amendments and additional information were submitted following comments made by consultees, as set out in section 3 of the agenda report. Following the submission of each of those packages, the site notices were erected advertising the submission of amended plans. Those who had submitted representations were also reconsulted following the submission of each of those packages.
Further amended plans were also submitted by the applicant following identification of errors contained within the second package of amendments and additional information submitted by the applicant. Those amendments were considered minor, were not considered to impact on any other issues raised by consultees in previous responses received, and represented an improvement in the scheme proposed. Therefore, it was considered that those further amended plans did not require formal reconsultation with consultees or third parties, and that no one has been prejudiced from having the opportunity to comment on the application as a whole. Objections have been raised by Lambourne Parish Council and Chiltern Folliot Parish Council for the reasons set out in section 4 of the agenda report. No objections have been raised by the local highway authority, the local flood authority, ecologist, landscape consultant, tree officer, archaeologist, conservation officer, transport policy officer, and environmental health officer. 33 representations objecting to the proposal have been received for the reasons summarised on pages 153 to 155 of the agenda report. 5 new representations supporting the application were received in the production of the agenda report for the reasons summarised in the update report. An additional 6 representations supporting the application was also received earlier today following production of the update report, providing the same reasons summarised in the update report for supporting the application. I shall now talk you through a few slides of photos of the site. Here we have a view of the application site from Ramsbury Road looking northwest. Members can see the hedgerow boundary that runs along the frontage of the application site. Here we have another view from Ramsbury Road looking directly west at the existing hedgerow. This is in the approximate location of the proposed access point. And another view of the application site from Ramsbury Road looking southwest. And this is a view of the application site from Ramsbury Road at the junction with the private access road to Membry Airfield. And this is a view from the private access road to Membry Airfield, looking across the application site southwest. Members will note the existing tree-lined boundary, western boundary of the application site, and the existing industrial unit to the south of the application site. Here we have a view from within the southeast corner of the application site looking north. The western tree-lined boundary that is existing is shown on the left of the photograph here, and in the background members can see the tower's stores. And this is a view from within the application site at the western boundary looking eastwards. In the far distance, members will see the hedgerow that adjoins Ramsbury Road, through which the new access is to be created. HGVs that are accessing the private access road to Membry Airfield with cuckoo clock in the background. And just on the south side is the existing vegetation that is to be retained. This is another view from within the application site, standing in the western corner, looking southeast. Again, the existing hedgerow along Ramsbury Road is in the distance. Southern vegetation to be retained is shown, and the existing industrial unit south of the application site can be seen. And this is another view from within the application site, the cuckoo copse and the private access road to Membry Airfield. And here we have a view from within the application site looking northwest, northwestern corner of the application site, where a section of the western boundary woodland is to be removed, approximately 35 metres in width, for the aircraft access. And lastly, this is a view from within the application site looking southwest, the western boundary tree belt on the right-hand side, and the existing industrial units to the south. The principle and scale of development proposed was determined under the outline application. Therefore, the main issues for consideration in this application in respect of access, layout, appearance and landscaping proposed are design, character and appearance, flooding and drainage, ecology, highways and other matters. This indicative block plan submitted for the outline application And condition 3 of the outline planning permission granted requires the reserved matter of layouts to be in broad accordance with this plan. This is the proposed layout of the site submitted for the reserved matters application. And members will note that it is broadly in accordance with the indicative block plan provided at outline stage. Here we have the indicative 3D views that were submitted for the outline planning permission. And I'll point out to members that on the northern elevation, 2 large openings of the museum were proposed. And this is the proposed elevation plan for this reserved matters application. The northern elevation of the proposed museum in this application comprises 1 large opening. Proposed scale of the building falls within the maximum height of 12.6 metres as required by condition 3 of the outline planning permission. Condition 5 of the outline planning permission restricts the floor areas of each use. The submitted plans shown here accords with that condition. The uses depicted here are museum in blue, warehouse in green, and ancillary offices and welfare security areas in yellow and pink. The proposed layout comprises the building to be sited along the western edge of the site with car parking area to the south of the building and a large hard standing of brushed concrete to the east of the building, bordered by swales along its eastern edge. The access road within the site and car parking area south of the proposed building would comprise tarmac with gravel surface parking bays and natural colour block paving for pedestrian areas. Extensive areas of landscaping is proposed in the eastern and southern parts of the site, which include a tree planted bund with woodland understory planting to the east of the proposed building and hard standing. This plan shows 3 cross sections with a line of sight from a height of 1.7 metres from the boundary with the adjacent private access road and Ramsbury Road across the proposed landscaping towards the building. For each section, an indication of the landscaping at first planting and then at 15 years is shown to demonstrate the impact of proposed landscaping on views from those locations once that landscaping has been established. Here we have a cross section of the site showing existing and proposed ground levels and height and slope of the proposed bund. The bund would be between approximately 4.1 and 4.3 metres in height above the existing ground level upon which it is to be located, with a slope of between 1 to 2.71 and 1 to 2.85 on the western side, a level top 3 metres in width, and a slope of 1 to 4 on the eastern side. As detailed in the update report, due to the topography of the site, which generally slopes down from west to east, the proposed bund would be sited at a ground level lower than the proposed ground level of the building. That difference in ground levels would result in the top of the bund being approximately 2.5 metres above the proposed ground level of the building, and the building being approximately 8.8 metres taller than the top of the bund. This plan also shows existing and proposed levels in the location of the proposed building and proposes that the height of the building would be 11.3 metres from the ridge to the proposed ground level. More clearly shown on the zoomed in section view of this section's plan, the existing ground level is denoted by the green line, and the proposed ground level is denoted by the blue line. Due to undulations in the existing ground levels are proposed to be raised in some parts by up to approximately 0.9 metres and lowered in some parts by up to approximately 0.7 metres, as shown on this plan and the following plan, where you can see areas of the ground level to be lowered. Condition 3 of the outline planning permission states that the building hereby approved shall be a maximum of 12.6 metres in height. It does not specify whether that height is to be measured from the existing proposed ground level. Nonetheless, the proposed height of the building would accord with this condition when measured from either the existing or proposed ground level. The tree planted bund would extend from the northeastern boundary of the site southwards towards the access road within the site. The planting for the bund, as part of the landscaping proposals, comprises individual trees of heavy standard or extra heavy standard form, together with a woodland planting matrix of trees of feathered form and understory shrub planting. Planting of mature trees is not considered suitable as they require extensive work in planting, including works to the roots, to ensure that they establish as they are more susceptible to failing once relocated and planted. Younger trees such as standard and heavy standard have a greater chance of becoming established and growing well. Some heavy standard form trees are proposed to provide greater instant vision mitigation of the building to be constructed. And together with all of the planting proposed will need to be carefully managed to ensure their retention. To ensure the continued provision of all of the proposed landscaping within the site until it has become well established, your officers propose that condition 9 set out in section 8 of the agenda report is amended to require the replacement of any landscaping that is removed, dies, becomes diseased or is seriously damaged over a period of 15 years rather than the standard 5 years proposed in the agenda report. That amended condition is provided in the update report. Further extensive tree planting. Woodland understory planting would continue southwards on the opposite side of the access road to join the southern boundary along which the same planting would continue. The eastern part of the site, north of the access road, would comprise grassland of agricultural appearance with an attenuation basin, trees at the northern edge, and wet wildflower meadow planting surrounding that basin. Additional hedgerow planting interspersed with native trees would be introduced to replace that lost as a result of the proposed access onto the highway and would continue along the sides of the internal access road within the site. The eastern part of the site, south of the internal access road, would also comprise grassland of an agricultural appearance, together with additional hedgerow planting interspersed with native trees along its boundaries. As noted within the update report, the length of the existing hedgerow along Ramsbury Road is approximately 160 metres. Belmont perform the new vehicle access and the visibility displays would result in approximately 68 metres of the existing hedgerow being removed. This equates to approximately 58.6 of the existing hedgerow along Ramsbury Road being removed, leaving approximately 41.4% of the existing hedgerow along Ramsbury Road to be retained in two sections either side of the proposed Belmont, comprising lengths of approximately 21 metres and 27 metres. The new hedgerow to be planted along Ramsbury Road and the access road within the site would total approximately 158 metres in length. Within the southwestern corner of the site, south of the proposed car park, orchard trees are proposed to be planted within an area of wildflower meadow. A foul drainage rebed, tussocky meadow planting and amenity grassland is also proposed in this location, with swales and native tree planting abutting the car parking area. The northern part of the site will comprise a large brush concrete hard standing area bordered by tree and woodland understory planting, adjacent to the existing vegetation north of the site. The taxing strip to enable access to the adjoining land beyond the application site would be surfaced in Grant-Crete. The proposed building would be approximately 179 metres long and approximately 72 metres wide at the widest point. The proposed building shown indicatively in the plan submitted with the outline application measured approximately 163 metres in length and 80 metres in width. I previously advised that the building would have a height of 11.3 metres. The majority of the roof of the proposed building will comprise a shallow dual-pitched mushroom-coloured roof with solar panels and roof lights. The western and eastern northern elevations of the warehouse and museum would be clad with more than green coloured cladding with entrance surrounds in anthracite, aside from the pedestrian entrance to the museum, which is to be clad in the same grey cladding as the office element. The ancillary office element of the proposed building, clad in a green-grey colour, would have a flat roof at a lower level than the main roof, with a small section wrapping around the southeastern corner of the building. Please note that any external lighting shown in this image provided by the applicant is currently being considered under a separate application for approval of matters reserved by conditions attached to the outline permission. The appearance of the majority of the proposed building would be reflective of buildings in the wider area in respect of colour and design. It is acknowledged that the ancillary office elements of the proposed building comprises a large area of glazing, particularly in the southeastern corner. However, this would be a minor element to the overall appearance and, when viewed in the context of the proposed landscaping and layout, is considered acceptable. Together, the layout and landscaping and appearance of the proposed scheme is acceptable. The proposed relocated access onto Ramsbury Road, and that shown in the application submissions, together with the internal layout of the road, will further reduce views of the proposed building from the public realm. As acknowledged in the consideration of the outline application, some localised harm to the character and appearance of the area and AONB will be experienced as a result of the layout, access and appearance of the development proposed. However, such impact will be limited, not experienced in the wider area, and will be minimised by the substantial landscaping proposed. Furthermore, any residual harm is to be balanced against the economic benefits of the proposal, as was the case for the outline permission. In respect of flooding and drainage, the layout and landscaping details provided propose an attenuation basin in the eastern part of the site, swales running north to south adjacent to the warehouse house standing along the northern edge of the internal access road, as well as along the southern edge of the proposed car parking. The foul drainage reed bed is also proposed in the southern area of the site. Representations received raised concern regarding the lack of a formal flood risk assessment provided with the outline application and this reserve matters application. No document titled as a flood risk assessment has been submitted as part of this application. However, the lead local flood authority have advised, as detailed in the update report, that whilst an FRA should have been provided at the outline stage, it would not have identified any flood risk and would offer no value to the proposal. The lead local flood authority conclude that no on or off-site flood risk would occur as a result of the development, subject to the approval of technical details to secure adequate on-site studs. Therefore, sufficient information has been provided to determine this application in the debate on the risk. Proposed studs shown on the submitted plans have been reviewed by the flood authority and are considered acceptable in respect of the layout and landscaping proposed. Technical details relating to the construction of the stud proposed is being dealt with under a separate application for the approval of matters reserved by condition 13 of the outline planning commission. The access layout and parking provision proposed is considered acceptable by the highways officer, subject to the conditions proposed in the agenda report. As previously advised, matters relating to the location of the site and traffic impact are not for consideration in the determination of this application. Concern has been raised by the parish council and representations received regarding the introduction in this application of the provision of an access to the adjacent Wembley airfield and use of the museum to display aircraft. For the avoidance of doubts, those elements of the development proposed in this application are not new. They were indicatively shown on the block plan submitted and presented to members at Western Area Planning Committee for the outline application as shown here. Furthermore, the description of development for the outline planning permission specifically refers to an aircraft museum building. In addition, condition 3 of that outline planning permission requires the layout of the site to be in broad accordance with this at the indicative block plan. As access was a matter reserved at outline stage for consideration in subsequent reserved matters application, this reserved matters application now definitively sets out the access proposed for an aircraft, including the number of anticipated aircraft ground movements. It is important to note that this application is for the approval of reserved matters only and does not include land outside of, but adjacent to, the application site. This reserved matters application does not seek approval of any change of use of the adjacent land or development or extension of the runway at Wembley Airfield and does not propose takeoff or landing of aircraft from within the application site. Whether the land outside of but adjacent to the application site has sufficient permission in place for flights of a Dakota aircraft is not for determination under this application. The aircraft ground movements, 5 in, 5 out per year, while the access proposed are considered ancillary to the permitted use of the aircraft museum, as they are not considered to be of such a number that would represent the material change of use from the planning permission granted. The number and type of aircraft movements within the application site are to be controlled by condition, as set out in section 8 of the agenda report, to ensure that those movements are restricted to being ancillary to the museum use that has been granted planning permission. Representations have been made disputing whether the outline planning permission was subject to a number of conditions imposing restrictions. The warehouse building and ancillary offices are permitted to be occupied by Walker Logistics Limited only. That does not prevent ownership of the building or site by a different company. Furthermore, no condition was imposed restricting who may occupy or operate the proposed museum. The use of the warehouse and office area is restricted to a B8 storage and distribution use of ancillary offices. Use of a museum area is restricted to only be used as a museum. Any material change in use of the development would require a planning application to be submitted. Lastly, the potential for light pollution in the AONB emanating from within the building through the proposed roof lights and openings can be adequately addressed by the proposed imposition of a condition. That proposed condition in section 8 of the agenda report requires a lighting assessment to be submitted and approved, which demonstrates the impact of light spill from the proposed building and also include detail of how any light spillage is to be mitigated if required. In conclusion, the details submitted in respect of this reserve matters application are considered acceptable. Therefore, members are recommended to grant approval subject to the conditions proposed in section 8 of the agenda report and the amended condition proposed in the update sheet. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for all that detailed presentation on this application. Members, with your permission and approval, I'd like to ask Mr. Karimi if he would go out into the foyer, because outside we have Mr. Reed and Mr. Floyd, who are down to attend to assist the Walker's team in answering questions, possibly later in the evening. I just want to make sure that they can hear. And if not, maybe we could make sure our voices are loud enough, because they need to hear the presentations, maybe to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Williams. You all agree? Thank you. I'll just wait till Mr. Creamy comes back.
It's just a general question. Are you taking general question, presenting officer, with regard to any clarification?
I am.
In the minutes. Are you going to take those next?
I will take them after we've had the presentation from the attendees.
Okay.
As it were. Okay. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Here is loud and clear, Chair.
Good, excellent, well done. Thank you all for that clarity. So, members, as you can see, one of the issues that we're addressing this evening is access. So I've asked Mr. Goddard, our highways engineer, to come along and present the new access that's been asked for on this application. Mr. Goddard, your observation on this, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As Mr. Brown mentioned a couple of times during his presentation, matters of traffic generation and traffic impact were considered by this committee at outline stage and were found to be acceptable by this committee. The matters before you tonight are to do with the layout of the site and access. The reason for access being considered is because the access has been relocated some 60 metres to the south from where it was shown at outline stage. The access complies with all standards with regards to width and regards to sight lines onto the Ramsby Road. I would like to point out that just because the access has been moved 60 metres to the south, it does not mean that traffic distribution has changed north to south in any way. Other matters to be considered regarding with the layout are car parking provision. The applicants have informed us officers that at any given time, 80 members of staff will be present on the site at any given time. Therefore, 90 car parking spaces provided is sufficient in my view. The museum is also provided with 10 car parking spaces, which I can also consider acceptable. There are also plentiful electrical vehicle charging points for electric vehicles, and cycle storage is also provided. On that basis, Chairman, your highway officer recommends approval with the conditions contained in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. Members, we now move on to the presentations by our attendees. Members, this evening I was approached by Councillor Bridget Jones from Lambourne Parish Council to say that her name hadn't appeared on the list of speakers. Mr. Brown has kindly addressed the register, and we cannot find a request to come in on Plan Apps for her to speak this evening. Therefore, I'm going to ask your approval vote. Are you happy that Mrs. Jones speaks on behalf of Lambourne Parish Council? All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. None against.
We'll suspend standing orders just for this item, and then we'll resume straight after the speaking.
Thank you. Right, so Councillor Jones, thank you. If you'd just like to come up to the end of the table, the reason I say is this is on Zoom, and therefore those that are watching, no doubt from Lambourne, will be able to see you making your presentation. Well, we'll get it organised so that if you come over just a little bit more, then we can see you.
Okay.
And come forward. And come forward. Would you like a seat?
Can I speak? Can I use my seat? Yes, I'll get it. Thank you. It's all right. I can get it. Is it?
Well, firstly, Mr. Jones, thank you for coming along this evening. I've seen you before. You've turned up for these meetings, so you know the format. You have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I'll give you some notification at 4 to know where you are, and then with 20 seconds I'll go in conclusion.
Okay.
When you're ready, I'll start. Thank you.
Change of use. B1 use is for a museum, not for an aircraft hangar. There's been a material change in the application, which now includes aircraft movements, an extension to the airfield with access from Walker's Logistics Building to a live runway. This was never discussed by the Western Area Planning Committee, nor raised by the case officer. The original application was for a private museum, open potentially by invitation, only 25 days a year. There is no traffic data for the museum in the travel plan, and this development was deemed unsustainable. The applicant's planning statement does not discuss the working plane or perhaps the landscape. To facilitate access to the airfield, a line of trees that previously provided screening has been removed to the rear of the site. This was done after the ANOB consultee had submitted their opinion, which stated that the negative impact this development would have on the environment would not outweigh the economic argument. Impact on the ANOB. The wider access, moved more centrally, will mean that the building is more visible from the road. And although the building is less wide, it's longer, will be extremely prominent within the ANOB and out of keeping in size and scale with ANOB policy. Is this access able to provide an adequate turning circle that these large vehicles require without blocking the public highway, as the turning circle provided deals with lorries on site and not access and egress to the site from Ramsbury Road? Landscaping being presented is very different. Assurances of mature trees would be used. Those proposed heavy standard are not mature and will not mask the building. Potential harms to the existing landscape relied upon at the outline stage of compromise. Pre-planning advice stated that the visual increase in the built form due to the narrowing and lengthening of the building is not mitigated, projecting the building beyond the existing screening. This has not been adequately addressed. Site layout. Parking is insufficient, given the rise in staff members provided to the Western Area Planning Committee. The figures rose from 40 in the application, but unsubstantiated 150 to 200 at committee, which swayed the economic argument. Traffic and road safety. Access to the site by public transport is non-existent. One public bus that stops on Ermine Street, with no provision for pedestrians, and the 19-foot pinch points on Raspberry Road do not allow 2 HGVs to pass each other safely. Walkers encouraging their staff to cycle to work on busy roads that are already dangerous is ill-advised, given that traffic figures, according to TRIPS data, will increase by 776 daily with this development. Flood risk assessment.
not undertaken. Why not? Because it would highlight the existing flooding of the Ransby Road from Membury. With further development, this problem will be exacerbated. Are the committee assured that the non-contamination of the aquifer, 3 ponds originally proposed and now reduced to 1, with swales expected to take additional water, and a single small reed bed to deal with foul water? The inconsistencies between information submitted by the applicant, when taken in their totality, are significant. And one wonders how far you can alter plans that are indicative without being required to submit a new application. Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act has not been submitted, therefore floor space is required to remain the same. Any internal altering of use, B1 to B8, which accommodates a plane that is not an exhibit as part of the museum, should be considered as an alteration of usable space, as B1 use is for a museum exhibit, B8 for a working plane. The case officer keeps reiterating that the floor space within the indicative plan is the same, but the usage is totally different. There should be a separate application for the hangar with the appropriate assessments and consultation being undertaken. Flights being agreed by planning officers, the accept can be done. However, the Civil Aviation Authority clearly states that consultation needs to be undertaken with all relevant parties, and this has not been done. Why not? Because at no point were flights presented by the case officer or discussed by the committee. The environmental impacts will be significant and will not protect the immunity of the residents. We urge committee members to address the inconsistency and the departure from the original application, as the changes are significant and not in broad accordance with.
20 seconds.
To refuse.
Excellent timing. Thank you very much. Members, a lot of information there. Do you have any questions of Councillor Jones? Thank you, Councillor Adams.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned trees being removed. Could you expand on the detail on that?
Yes, certainly. At the rear of the site, give access to the air.
Sorry, can you do north, south, east and west? So when you say rear of the site.
West, a bit west, thank you. The west of the site, trees have been removed to give access to the runway. Trees that actually would help with the carbon footprint of the overall site.
That has already been done.
Yes.
That was before the AONB or
Yes.
after the AONB.
After they had submitted their report.
You mind if I?
Yeah, that's a follow-up.
Yeah. You also mentioned there's already flooding.
Yes.
Please expand on that.
Okay, West Berkshire Council are aware of the situation. It's been reported. John Stanley is currently dealing with it, and it's also in the local under the flood risk assessment programme. There is runoff from the old airfield. It runs down the Membury Access Road. Any new development that has removed any vegetation or resulted in funds being provided has just ensured that the water comes shooting down Ransby Road. It's a constant problem at the moment. There's floods regularly and there's heavy rainfall and freezes in the winter.
Can I just check? I believe you said flood coming down the access road to the airfield.
Yes, comes off the airfield.
So it comes off the airfield down that road.
Yeah.
Which is where the original access point was.
Yes, where we stood, where committee members stood the other day. Yes. It runs off there. It also comes off the Trinity Grain site and other sites where businesses have basically removed vegetation. It's been a problem now for some 3.5 years.
Thank you. Councillor Barlow.
Through you, Chairman. In your introduction, you were suggesting that the building was specifically for a museum
Yes.
to house this aircraft.
Yes.
You then went on about your concern about the access to the airfield. Are you suggesting that Lambourne Parish Council was happy with a museum, but not happy for an active building, which is going to allow an airplane, a Dakota in this case, to move back and forth to the airfield? Is that correct?
The parish council are opposed to any flight movements because it's never been discussed, never gone to committee, and wasn't in the initial plan. The fact that there's a plane on a drawing, but no discussion that came to the committee about flights or taxiing planes is a concern. We work as parish councillors, we work in the public's interest. we feel it is in the public's interest. It's now changed from a museum with a static exhibit to being something where the flights and the flight numbers are changing. The flight numbers when we met with Walker's Logistics were between 20 and 30 per annum. They're now stating it's 10. Our question as parish council is how is it going to be enforced?
Thank you. I mean, during the same line, that what you started with seemed to include statements that you regard as facts, which were in complete opposition to what we saw from the plans and what we read in our report. Can you agree that the outline planning application did include an area of woodland removed to provide, or that could potentially provide access to the airfield? There's a large slice of woodland on the drawing we show, which I can remember from that outline application.
It was never stated it was going to give access to a live railway, live airfield. It was never stated it would be used to taxi a plane in and out. And it was never stated that there would be flights from a museum.
But it wasn't, was it, ever stated that it would not be? So I agree with you that it was never stated it would be. But the fact that you go to the trouble of taking down all those trees and making what clearly is potentially an access to the airstrip, whilst it was an open question whether they came by road, the bits of aircraft, or whether they came in complete form, presumably by air, it was never discussed, I agree, but it was evident from the plans that it could be done. So and you're not saying it was ever
I don't
done.
think it was.
Wasn't it? Okay, well, we'll have to disagree.
Yeah.
Councillor Cole, you had your hand up?
I think I'm covered now.
It's all covered. Members, any more questions? Councillor Jones, could you just go through your concerns of what you consider to be a change of use in terms you consider was a museum to now as a hangar?
Yes.
And the change from D1 to whatever.
Yes.
Can you give me where you come up with that complete? Yeah.
Well, because it was clearly stated it was going to be a museum to house an exhibit, which was the Dakota plane. I don't think anybody had a problem with that. The fact that it's now become a hangar, not a museum, that is going to be used to bring a plane in and out to repeated aircraft shows is a totally different issue, and actually will have a big impact on the local environment, both in noise, air quality, and should be subject to a full environmental impact assessment. The runway, the taxiing strip, should have been included in the landmass for an environmental impact assessment. In our view, as parish councils, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Thank you. I'll just follow up on Councillor's point there on the aircraft and the access through. And, I mean, this committee could consider the 5 movements in and out as being code in and out of the hangar as an exhibition outside the hangar. We have no evidence at the moment it's going to fly.
Well,
That's not.
I'm sorry, but Walker's Logistics did say to us when we met with them, they would be going to aircraft shows.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, there has not been an aircraft show on Membury Airfield in the last 12 years when I've lived there. So it's going elsewhere.
This committee can only deal with the information it's got, not supposition. Yeah. Any more questions, anybody? Well, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm left to stand, am I?
Sorry, did you want my chair? My chair and I. Yeah.
Chairman, would you just indulge me just 1 minute outside of my time? Because 3 or 4 of the drawings that were put up there showing the layout of the shed were wrong. They didn't show the museum, they just showed stacking of
Would you like a particular picture put up when?
yeah, put up all of the floor plans, the ones associated with the top landscaping, the hard landscape and the road layout.
I'm happy to back you up. Can you find those, please, Mr. Brown? Thank you.
Not that one. This one, there are 3 like this. There should be a museum there, but it's not there, so we're all confused.
Hold on. Let's just make sure we've got the drawings that you want to relate to and they're ready available. Are there another one there, Mr. Brown? That's that one. Is this one another one you'd like to see?
Yeah, well, all of the ones that show that scale of the shed, yes.
Okay.
Are all the same. I think there's 3 in total.
Can one drawing cover all of your issues, or you need to relate to, do you know which one to call up? Because you've only got.
No, I'm just
only got 5 minutes and I'm concerned that you're.
No, I don't want to get into my 5 minutes. I just wanted to make a point. The presentation was wrong. And it's misleading because the museum is not shown. That's my only point.
But you'll have no opportunity to say what they are. It's to the committee apart from in your presentation. Now,
Perhaps that queries something that.
I mean, I have a question.
can ask.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Now, before you start, you're Mr. King.
I'm Mr. King.
Good. Right, Mr. King. I have Miss here to speak as well, and here to speak as well. So, if you'd like to all, are you all speaking?
No, I will be there.
Oh, you speak. And you'll be here for questions. So the full 5 minutes they'll go with you.
No.
Okay. Well,
Can we all stand there then?
if you're going to speak, then you need to go up there. Now, what I will do, if you just come over a little bit, so I can only see the back of your heads, unfortunately, but a little bit more from Mr. Spears. I'm doing this because of this is being zoomed, and obviously people in your parish want to see that you've attended and hear you speak. So if you could introduce yourself to Mr. Green, because he's taking minutes. So when you do speak, he can report that you said properly. So this is Mr. King, Ms. Coppinger, and Mr. Pierce. Okay.
I'm current chairman of the Woodlands Protection Group.
Okay, so are you all representing the Woodland Protection Group?
I'm representing the
Yes,
Woodlands Protection Group.
objector, individual, and Mr. Pierce. Right, so we've done all the introductions, 5 minutes in total. 4 minutes, I will give you some warning. You've got a minute left, and then I'll give you 20 seconds to give you a bit of time to conclude, as opposed to 10, and it's done rather hurried. So when you're ready,
Thank you, Chair.
You're away for 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
This application includes many changes to the outline plan, some of which are fundamental. For example, following regular incidents of flooding in this area and the reduction of rainfall storage ponds in the application, it is necessary to assess the flood risk. The statement of intent included in these documents and referred to in section 6 of the case officer's report is insufficient and is not an assessment of risk. A full flood risk assessment is required based on current legislation. The former museum is a hangar for storage of operational aircraft. The submission proposes the connection to a live airfield via a taxiway and refers to a number of flights which should only be constrained by the refusal of future planning applications to increase them. None of this was included or discussed at the outline planning stage. The EIA screening carried out is insufficient. An extension to an airfield over 1 hectare must be assessed under section 10E of schedule 2 of the EIA regulations. The zero carbon condition, condition 9, has not come forward with this application. This is because while the building may be carbon neutral, the development is not. A full carbon emissions assessment is required, taking account of the significant increase in road traffic, air traffic, and changes to the landscaping. The new building is 7 meters longer and 15 meters narrower than the building approved. As well as making the building more prominent in the landscape from Embry Road, this has changed the operational space. And this can only mean that the operation of this building will change from that proposed at the outline planning stage. And this is supported by the late information provided by the applicant at the outline planning stage, saying that the number of people working in the shed would go from 40 to 200. More employees, more throughput, more HG feed movers. And we've said that before many times. This is why the personal condition was and still is a redundant concession to the applicant. The WBC Highways Department have restated that based on the highway situation, this development is unsustainable and is in direct conflict with the council's climate emergency statements. Now add to this traffic levels which could be 4 to 5 times higher than those analysed at the outline stage. This development has no merit in environmental terms. In summary, we see the attempts by the applicant to get this development approved. It is changed from the scheme approved at the outline planning stage
It has not been scrutinised or consulted on, and it should not be taken forward. It raises significant process and legal issues which are open to challenge. Mitigation is available to you by imposing additional conditions in perpetuity as follows. The road traffic generated must be kept below that analysed at outline planning stage. The use of this building should generate 0 flights. The separation wall between the Class 8 and Class 1 use must be retained. And we will take questions on any of those issues.
Ms. Coventry, you do have time if you'd like to speak.
How long do I have?
You have a good minute and a half.
Okay, so just very quickly then, there is no flood risk assessment. That is contrary to CS 16. A statement is not lawful as it doesn't assess the risk of flooding on and off the site. The Museum D1 doesn't give planning permission for an operational aircraft hangar as this would require B8. In fact, the proposal description says nothing of an aircraft, of an operational aircraft. And actually, that's the important bit. It doesn't matter what pictures you've got on there, that's what matters. If I put on a plan for a personal application of mine, if I put a lorry in the driveway, that doesn't mean I've got planning permission for a lorry park. So to say that this indicative plan has anything at all of any value is an absolute nonsense. Next thing I'd like to
You now have 1 minute, so do continue.
Okay, so the next thing is both the outline and the reserved matter screening opinions are incorrect. The outline screen red line didn't match the red line of the site, so it didn't include the taxiing strip. And the reserved matters one is incorrect because if you're attempting to approve condition 12 with aircraft movements, this is an EIA regulation Schedule 2 10E development. That is, the development involves an extension to an airfield over a hectare and not 10A, an industrial estate development project. This is required for the correct stakeholder consultation to take place and appropriate environmental assessments. The personal permission is important, and I would like to bring that to your attention because PPG guidance states that the use of a condition for a limited company is inappropriate and unenforceable. This condition requires a limit on the number.
And I'll stop you there. Thank you very much. Just stay there. We may have some questions.
Okay. Any question?
Yeah, thank you very much. I've got 3 questions, if I may. Firstly, why does it matter to go from 3 to 1 ponds if the effect is the same? Secondly, did you realise that, as far as we've been told by officers, Dakotas could fly in and out now without any planning permission on that airstrip? Now you may.
That's incorrect.
Okay. Okay, if it's incorrect, that's your answer. And thirdly, the change in employees. Now, I'll ask the applicant this in a minute, but is the concern that you have that the total number of journeys, even if it's 40 full-time equivalent as opposed to 40 actual people, obviously if it's lots of people working part-time, then there's lots more journeys because they're each coming and going in a 24-hour period, which is more journeys. Is that what your concern is? Or do you fear that actually there's going to be more activity, more employment, more turnover?
Fortunately, in my professional life, I've done a number of developments like this, and the wrong approach was used. What happens when you use a personal permission, which I've never heard of before, is you suppress the true traffic.
Okay.
So the data that was presented in our review, and I've done more calculations, so of our consultants and some of Mr. Walker's consultants that have shown that the traffic would be 800, possibly 800 per day instead of 125. Now that's been decided, we understand that, but we can't leave it because it will be horrendous.
Okay, I think you've answered my question. The third question, first one about the ponds and the impact. It's just a number, isn't it? I mean, to my mind, the one is much bigger than the 3 small ones.
Well, it's there are 2 issues: it floods, and there's less ponds. So somebody should do a proper appraisal. It's not been done.
Okay, thank you. I think you've answered all 3.
Thank you, Jake. Go down to John.
Well, no, actually, I'm not. On a point of order check, you seem to be looking at transport and flooding and things. And
It's quite clearly here, access to landscaping.
I quite appreciate that. This is their presentation.
Yeah, sure.
And we're.
I think it does okay.
All right to ask any questions on their quick presentation.
Sorry.
Whether stuff that was presented to us is not appertaining to what we're considering this evening, which I said right from my introduction, that of access, appearance, landscaping and layout. The whole issue of transport has already been determined at the previous application. So if the ladies and gentlemen want to put that to us within that, that's what's done, and we can come back and ask some questions on it.
I felt like
How much you want to take into consideration with our deliberations this evening, I leave it to you.
With respect, Chairman,
I'm not opening it up to debate. Thank you very much. You've done very well. Are there any more questions? Are there any more?
Another question which we were unable to answer.
I'm just going around the table. One more question. What was that question of Councillor Vickers? Which was?
It was the one about the Dakota.
Thank you.
Well, yes, okay. I mean, I've had an answer from one of the objections.
You did.
But I'm happy to hear from any others.
So as far as we can tell, there is a certificate of lawfulness, and just to be, we've got a map here to explain. So if that's the
Part of the application.
Yeah.
That wasn't.
it's not no, but it's to try to explain with you that material.
Items, unfortunately.
Well, and this is
Articulate it verbally.
Okay, so that is the point then, that this is something that needs discussing. This is a previous application regarding
it's the licensing of the airfield when it was opened up
lawfulness
in 1995.
Thank you.
and this is the documentation. This is all of the consultation that went on between the council, any consultees or stakeholders, and the applicant. So what I'm trying to say to you is, it is inappropriate to condition this. This needs discussing properly.
Thank you.
Everybody needs an opportunity to discuss it. It is.
Thank you. Your question.
Yeah, I think I've got
Thank you.
a form of answer to my question, but I think I'm going to have to clarify with officers as
I
well.
think you're going to have to answer that. So thank you very much for your presentation. Councillor, I'll just come back in. Yeah, Councillor. In yet?
I'm not. The personal permission thing that keeps being mentioned, it's kind of announced. I'm afraid I don't understand it. But it does seem to pertain to the traffic. Now, and where the access point.
To the question.
Yeah, I'm just trying to run through it in my mind so that they know how to answer the question I'm trying to formulate. So could you go into your time and please explain the personal permission bit and the issue you have with it, how that relates to the traffic and the placement of the current access point?
Can we both,
Which
can
is
we,
different.
can we kind of come in together on that? Is that okay?
So normally when you do a development of this size and scale, you use a model, in this case, the TRIX model, that uses information from typical developments around the UK as to what traffic they generate. Okay, if you use that model, which consultants working for Walkers and us and others have used on this development, the number of HDVs goes up from 125 to 875 or something like that, but it's 4 or 5 times. So this one, the applicant submitted details of his current operation, the number of vehicles leaving the sheds at the other end of Membry Road, and worked out the floor area, the number of visits, the floor area for this, the floor area for that, and came up with an equivalent for that particular. But that's based on the ownership of the shed being with Walkers. That is not sustained forever.
That's in the outline stage, which you were not considering tonight, correct?
Well, it's something of which
We would.
you still need to know that this is a disaster, and it was wrong.
Thank you.
Government, I would like to just say, so the PPG, that's the government guidance, says categorically, it is inappropriate to use a limited company on a condition, because you just cannot enforce it. And the reason why you can't enforce it is because the ownership of that company can change. So today, 153 movements, but there is nothing to stop the ownership of Walker Logistics Limited going to an operation of a much bigger size. in which case we need to look at the maximum potential of those traffic movements, which is somewhere in the order of 800 movements a day instead of 160.
Thank you for that answer. And I'll draw a line there. I will draw a line there. Because again, I will direct the members, we are looking at access, appearance, landscape and layout.
As far
And
as
we can get drawn into all the vehicle movements, which unfortunately have been addressed before. It may be something that we consider, or the lady consider have not been addressed properly in their opinion, but it's not something I'm afraid to see that we should.
Sorry, thank you very much. We have 3 people standing here. I've got most of the answer, but Luke Pierce would like to expand, and I would like to hear what he has to say on the subject.
Just remind us what you're going to answer the question on. This is on personal.
At the outline, you discussed scale, agree? So we can't talk about scale here. Okay. Traffic does not come into scale. That's the scale of the development. So the public didn't get to discuss traffic movements at the scale time, and we didn't. The time now is on the reserve matters. That is when you discuss the 4 other aspects of planning here. And we're trying to close us down on it.
The remaining issues on the reserve matters are, as we said, those 4 highways have all been addressed previously.
Yes.
No, not with scale. Absolutely not. That's the scale of the development. But when you limit that, you could then limit it further on the reserve matters.
I think
I'll get some clarification from.
Well, we're going to.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Drake, it might be worth me just clarifying.
Please, if
now.
you would.
On an outline planning permission, you are considering, sorry, let's phrase it the other way. The reserve matters are the detailed design of the proposal. So when you look at an outline planning, it's normally done in order to, obviously, schemes evolve as they develop, all schemes do, and it's meant to be a way of establishing the principle of development, but enabling that detailed design to come later. The 5 reserve matters are access, layout, scale, appearance, and landscaping. So anything that falls within those 5 parameters can be reserved for later consideration. When we're looking at the outline planning permission, you're looking at the principle, whether it complies with policy, but also anything that's fundamentally intrinsic to the development. So in this case, that's why we say that traffic was a consideration that was looked at the outline stage. We are looking at access, so the position of the access point and the implications and impacts for that. It's relevant now, but not the traffic movements, because that was fundamental to the development. So, yeah, those matters, anything fundamental. That's why there's a lot of conditions on the outline which cover all sorts of matters, such as drainage.
Can I just add one comment? We are discussing the new entrance, and that new entrance will have, and it wasn't shown on the picture, unfortunately, will have a number of lorries queuing up either side on a very, very narrow road where 2 lorries can't pass. That must be up for discussion.
Thank you.
I think everyone appreciates your point.
Yeah.
So well.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. And as we now come on to the applicant and agent, and I'd like to invite, if I may, Mr. Reid and Mr. Lloyd just to the door, just in case, so they can hear and maybe assist with any questions as a project manager and a development manager, I think. Otherwise, I will ask speakers, you know who you're going to speak, to come up again. So we have Mr. Walker from Walker's Logistics, Elizabeth Bell, Cornish Architect, and Jim Darcy from Pegasus. I think I'm right there. And Paul Reid, Development Manager, and William Floyd, Project Manager, who will be stood at the door. I'll just wait for them to come. You've heard the format. I'll give you 5 minutes. I'll give you a notification at 4, should you need that time, and then I'll give you 20 seconds just to conclude. So maybe just a quick introduction, Mr. Walker. You're going to do the presentation wholly, or are you going to sit by your time? Okay.
No, we'll go as quickly as we can.
Wait, just out the door, just so you can hear, to absolutely right in terms of what needs to be done. So let me just get myself organised here, and then when you are ready, I am ready to start 5 minutes.
Okay. Good evening, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Philip Walker. Myself and my family own Walker Logistics. I started the logistics business 24 years ago when I purchased the Membry site
At the time, it consisted of a series of neglected commercial buildings and unsightly outside storage. Over the years, I remodeled the land and buildings into a modern functional logistics facility. Starting with just one employee in 1999, our family business now employs over 150 full-time members of staff. The business has grown steadily over the years and is now run by myself and my sons. The business traded through the pandemic, keeping all of our staff employed without the need for government support. Our business plan is to continue to grow the company and to remain at Membury, where we've become one of the largest employers in the area. The company reached capacity about 5 years ago and is now restricted in what new business it can take on due to the lack of space. In 2019, we started the process of trying to obtain planning permission through the pre-app service, gaining outline consent in April 21. Once, and if granted, the new building is completed and fully operational, we estimate we will create an additional maximum of 200 jobs based across our site, based on current business customers and staff ratios. My family is passionate about World War II history and the important role Membury played during the war and the repatriation of Europe. As part of our outline application, we included a museum to show the story of Membury and the benefit of the general public. 10 years ago, my family secured a Dakota aircraft from a scrapyard as it had operated from Membury during the war years, including an important role on the D-Day operations. The aircraft is hoped to be flying again in 2023 and may form part of a display at the museum when practical. I'd like to clarify any misconception that the museum would be used as an operational aircraft hangar. I can assure you this is not the case. Dakota needs to be located at an airport where it has both maintenance and refueling facilities. It is our intention to only bring the aircraft to Membury for display purposes on a maximum of 5 occasions during the summer months. If a number of local residents are so against this magnificent, historically important aircraft being displayed at its wartime home, then we are willing to agree that it will not be positioned within the building. Thank you.
No, right.
Mr. Darcy?
Okay, Mr. Bell's called the shot out, isn't it? The design's been
2 minutes and 15 seconds.
okay. The design's been developed to suit the requirements of the client's operational needs and regulatory requirements, with input from specialist consultants. We've also amended the design to take account of responses received from the council's officers and consultees. These developments have enabled us to adjust the proportions of the building, setting the eastern elevation significantly further back into the site. This, together with the revised access and the gentle bend introduced to the access road, allows more space and opportunity for landscaping to soften and screen the view of the building. The finished floor level, which is the finished internal ground floor, is set at approximately mid-ground level of the existing land, as explained by Mr. Brown. Outside the building, the paths will be set to provide level thresholds at entrances, apart from the 2 dock levelers, where the level will be about 1.2 metres lower to allow for the lorries and the tailgate. The building height proposed at 11.3 rather than the 12.6 and previously proposed, will be screened by the bund, which will rise 2.5 metres above the finished floor level. Shall I stop? Because I know you want to speak.
Thank you, members. Look, this Reserve Matters application is all about the detail. But the details of this scheme are really important given the site's sensitive AONB location. The controls imposed by the outline permission are clear and have been adhered to. The outline drawings, as you've seen, they were quite basic, but importantly, we broadly accord. And those are the important words. We broadly accord with those drawings. They've been made by Liz to work architecturally and operationally for the 2 uses.
20 seconds in conclusion.
Finally, this is as much a landscape proposal as it is a building proposal. And we've kind of given considerable effort to ensure that the proposed soft landscaping and the drainage schemes work in harmony with each other from day 1 all the way through to year 15. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tarzi. Members, any questions, please? We do. Councillor Beck.
Thank you, John. Can I ask you, you may recall that the presenting officer, Jake Brown, talked about anticipated aircraft movements. Now, you would appear to be accepting the principle, if this committee is willing to actually grant planning permission, that you will be allowed to take off 5 times a year and land 5 times a year. Now, my question is, you just said, clarified to us this evening, that basically your intention to use the hangar is, for museum purposes. And I also get a clue, maybe rightly or wrongly, that you're only proposing to open that to the public to come to the museum at weekends and bank holidays, because there would appear to be insufficient parking for these visitors to the museum. That's one thing you can clarify to us. But the other thing is, as I see it, you've got an aircraft base there. You never know what's going to happen with an old aircraft. You may have to do ground running to test the brakes, etc., etc. Could you clarify this? Because if you were, for argument's sake, you want to take off, on Tuesday to go to somewhere or other, to an ocean show or whatever, you need to run the thing. So you can come out and go onto the airfield. That's one of your, that is one ground movement. And when you take off, that's 2. Now, assuming you do the ground movement and if you found there's a problem with the engine, suddenly you have to work on the engine, at Membray, and then you have to test it again before you go off to your show. So I just feel that this 5 movements, 10 movements a year, particularly if they're interpreted legally as aircraft movements, as opposed to fly-offs and fly-ins, you wouldn't be able to operate.
Well, movements are referred to as flights. So that's where that comes from. So we're restricting the amount of times it comes in and goes out. You're right, but as I said in my opening presentation, the aircraft is not going to be based at Membray. It's not going to have its maintenance work, its engine runs, its gear lift, or any other preparation work for flying to be done in the museum. It's not a hangar to operate from. It's currently at Coventry Airport. There's a very good chance it'll stay at Coventry as long as Coventry doesn't close. It has its maintenance. That's where it's being restored. They have fueling. They have all the equipment that we need. We can't just rock up and turn the engines on and drive out the hangar. This is something that needs to be based somewhere where it's safe. My son is the pilot of this. He's rated on this aircraft, very passionate about it. And this aircraft will not be coming to Membray. And as I said, if local residents or objectors feel that it's the wrong thing to do, we won't have the aircraft at the museum. It'll be a shame. The idea was that it will land on the grass strip at the adjacent airfield that we don't own, and it would taxi in across the grass creek, and it would sit outside on display for the general public to climb inside and have a good look at what it was all about. That's the idea. And if it's a big problem, we'll bin it.
So what you're saying is it's not the intention to house that aircraft.
No, it's not. No, it's not. They can tut all you like, but it's not. It's not going to be there. It's not practical to keep it there. And the other point is this aircraft needs 1,500 meters to take off on. And the only 1,500 meters available is a grass strip adjacent.
Yeah.
And it's quite wet at times, the airfield, and therefore, you can't take off if it's wet. It's going to be a very restricted use if it comes to Membray. But as I say, we're open to that.
Could you clarify the car parking situation for visitors to the museum?
Yeah, well, if it's
is the museum going to be open 7 days a week?
No, it's not. No, it's going to be manned by volunteers and people who've got exhibits and things that they're loaning to the museum. So at the moment, it's proposed under the 28 days that it'll be available to the general public. So my son and other volunteers will open the museum, show people around. We're going to bring school children there. My son already makes presentations on the aircraft night fright to local schools and colleges. So
what capacity have you got for those visitors along with your...
We've got 10 car parking
extra workers.
We've got 10 car parking spaces at the museum that's separate from any of the employment there. And if it's open at weekends, then there's less parking required for staff.
Thank you. I've got Councillor. Councillor, technical.
Thank you, Chairman.
If the museum is not going to be used for to house an aircraft, what is it going to be used for?
It's many artifacts that have been collected. There's currently a small museum at Littlekirk that's run by Roger Day and a team of his merry men who've written books on Membry at War and Savernake at War. Those exhibits will come to Membry. We've got 6 military vehicles, jeeps, a command car and a half track, which are all in Membry livery that we've restored. They will be on display. There'll be uniforms, all number of things. All of the crew that flew night flight during the war. My son has been in contact with the families in the States and the relatives of those pilots, and we've got photographs of them bringing the aircraft over when it was transport flight came over in 1942. There's a whole load of history that we can show. Lots and lots of stuff.
Thank you. May I continue?
You can.
That actually sounds quite positive. Different line. There's a lot of glazing to be seen. What are the hours of operation of the building?
Well, the office are only there between 8:30 and 6:30 would be latest, not all at the same time. We're conscious of outside lighting and any light pollution. We don't envisage having a lot of outside lighting. We are happy to put any screening on the glass if we want to, but not all those offices will be occupied, and some of them are warehouse facing as well, not facing outside.
There's a condition on the outline planning permission which makes it very clear that the hours of restriction for delivery vehicles to and from the warehouse, but it doesn't stop staff who are picking and packing goods for distribution to be working in the warehouse itself. But as Mr. Walker says, they won't be in the office. There'll be staff working a night shift in the warehouse itself.
Yeah, the ratio of our warehouse operatives just to office staff is probably 20 to 1. The office,
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, it is.
But in that case, that vast amount of glazing, does that look into the warehouse? In which case they'll need light in there and that light will spill out, but you will deal with that.
Yes, we will. Yes, I mean, you can answer.
The glazing that you see on the drawings are windows to the offices and the larger piece, which is just the entrance hall. All of the lighting for energy efficiency would be on presence detectors. So if there's nobody there, it will automatically turn off. And that's sort of standard practice these days in offices, probably is.
We have 2 conditions. We have one condition on the outline, which deals with external lighting, and we have a proposed condition on the reserved matters, which deals with internal light spillage from the building.
Okay. Another minor matter. To get this access, you've got to take out better part of 60% of that hedge. That hedge looked to me a bit like a countryside stewardship hedge. Is it a countryside stewardship hedge?
No. No,
It was put in what, 20 years ago?
No, probably about 15 years ago I planted it. I also planted the large belt of trees on the other side that's adjacent to the runway 27 years ago. So that was just a load of rubble, which I cleared and I planted those trees. And we haven't taken any of those trees out to access to and from the runway. That will be dependent on whether we decide to actually bring the aircraft to the site or not.
Thank you. Councillor Adams, I think he's next.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. And thank you for your presentation. You said something very interesting. You suddenly made the museums and an awful lot more interesting and more probably quite popular. The sources that you quoted in terms of this half track's going to come from here, and roughly how many traffic movements do they get?
You mean the military vehicles?
Yes. I mean, to those museums where they're currently displayed.
The museum, the military vehicles are currently stored in my barn.
So they're not available.
So they're not. Anyway. No, they're not coming from other sources. They will go to the museum and live in the museum.
Thank you. Councillor Diggers? No, you're finished. Been dealt with. Yes, you do, Councillor Bartlett.
Question a few minutes ago from, I think it's from Councillor Cole, regarding the removal of the trees on one boundary, access of the airfield, and also obviously access to the site from the at Ramsbury Road.
Yeah.
That of course will have to be restricted, presumably because of nesting birds and things like that. Had you considered that in your deliberations regarding timescales?
I can answer that question. I mean, we have to take trees out to accommodate the access onto Ramsbury Road and the taxi strip in the event of us kind of creating the taxi strip. The removal of any trees or vegetation is controlled by the Wildlife and Countryside Act. And nesting birds is absolutely right. And there will be a time of year that we can remove those trees so we don't disturb nesting birds, and there'll be a time of the year that we can remove them. Exactly the same way as we do in farming, that we're only allowed to cut our hedges between outside the nesting season.
Thank you, Councillor Applegate.
Yeah, sorry, I must admit, you've mentioned that you redeveloped most of the airfields. I think the area you've been doing work there. Not the airfield, sorry, land.
Not the airfield, no, the land.
The land, yes. Does that include, do you have rights over the road that leads to the airfield then?
No.
I'm trying to understand why in this detail, the access point has been removed from where it was originally showed in the outline stage, because I can quite easily imagine that there'll be greater area for lorries, etc. too. So what was the reason behind moving it? Right.
I think there were two reasons. We took advice from our highway consultants. We could have kept it where it was on the indicative plans. They were closer to the two closest residential properties to the site. So obviously when HGVs are slowing down or speeding up, they use their air brakes and they create noise. We've moved it. We actually think it's 45 metres. Your report says 60 metres south, but our highway consultant said the visibility at that point was better than where we had it on the indicative block plan with the outline planning application. The principle of the access was agreed, and obviously we have to provide the necessary visibility displays, and that's what's dictated the hedge removal.
And it was further away from the existing access that we don't own onto the airfield, which was better to be further away from that. And in answer to a question earlier about HGVs queuing up on the road, that won't happen.
I think that's not a question.
I have a question. You were mentioning about when the aircraft lands and it taxis into the museum, call it. It will get so close, obviously, to the museum on the runway, grass strip or whatever. Then you said it will come in on the grass, concrete space onto the concrete apron.
Yeah.
Are you considering, just for everybody's satisfaction, that presumably will be tugged? It won't be flown in with it or driven by engines from the runway to the outside the
No, exactly right, because there is a slight incline there as well, coming down to the front of the museum. If she comes in, she'll land on the grass, and then engines will be off. We have purchased and find an old Second World War tug, and the tug will tug her in and down to the grasscrete and in front. It'd be too dangerous to operate the aircraft with the propellers, both engines running, and coming in and negotiate a tight turn to bring it down into the pad.
But just for others' satisfaction, how far away from the museum will you be cutting engines before you get to the museum? How far are you going to tug it before you come into your red line site?
I think the grass strip would, just off the top of my head, would be about 800 metres.
Thank you.
Maybe a metre, maybe a kilometre further away.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your presentation this evening. And finally, we come on to our ward member. Now, members, as you might know, Howard Wollaston, Councillor Wollaston is the ward member for Lambourne. And unfortunately, he's unable to be with us this evening, and I won't give the reasons why. But he has asked Councillor Cole to represent him this evening and to give a written presentation. Following that presentation, I will not be asking Councillor Cole to ask any questions. I don't think it's proper that we wouldn't be, as it were, qualified to answer questions on somebody else's presentation. So, Councillor Cole, if you'd like to stand, I know it's an imposition, but would you prefer me to? I'd like you to stand so that everybody on the Zoom can see. You treat it.
I'll only see my back.
Yeah, well, at least I know you're here, and then, although we can see exactly your chair, but I think so. I remember asking Councillor Wallace to stand, and I got
right.
I did have a bad knee at the time, but I still made it.
Members, in that case, these are not my words.
No.
And as the chairman says, I will not be taking questions.
However, the gentleman that I'm replacing does actually choose to state where he is. I will start. Firstly, my thanks to James Cole for agreeing to read out this statement, as I am abroad on holiday. I've been lobbied heavily by my residents to oppose any further intensification of use of memory industrial estate over many months and indeed years. This is not NIMBYism. Indeed, most would welcome small-scale light industrial uses offering employment to local people. Concerns revolve around the following key issues: the significant increase in HGV travel. Independent surveys have shown that HGV movements on the B4000 have more than doubled in recent years. HGV traffic is also impacting on Lambourne itself and other surrounding villages such as Chiltern Folliot. Traffic movements at unsociable times, water runoff caused by creating hard standing, flood risk, loss of dark skies impact on the AONB. It was for these reasons that I voted against the original application, which succeeded 5-4, despite one member in support, saying that when he inspected on a Sunday, there didn't seem to be a traffic issue. The grounds for support were the creation of 200 jobs. That was admitted the vast majority were bust in Swindon and Reading, so having virtually no positive impact on the local economy. Supporting a local business, which implicitly suggested that it might relocate. The creation of a museum to house a C-47 Dakota and possibility of rehousing the RAF Welford Museum collection. I still think that the committee got it wrong, but we are where we are. To be fair to walkers, they are a good employer. Look after their staff, maintain a clean and tidy facility. I have no doubt that whilst they remain the occupiers, that situation will continue. They are generous to the local community, and have a commitment to landscaping to minimize the physical impact of their proposed development by planting mature trees, creating bunds, etc. But things change over time, and a future occupier may well not be so responsive to the environment in the AONB. In particular, I have no grounds to disbelieve Walker's claim that the HGV movements they generate are relatively limited, albeit I still believe the original application should have been assessed on the accepted tricks approach. It implies a far higher level of traffic movement. What really concerns me about this application is that one of the major selling points was the museum. We now have an application for a hangar with a taxiway to a runway. The claim is that it would be for no more than 10 flights a year, but I attended a meeting with representatives of the Woodlands Protection Group in December 2021. Walker's own minutes confirmed it would be at least 20 flights in and out to attend air shows. And that is before the need for the aircraft to be flown out for servicing purposes. Embry Airfield is used for gliders, microlights, and small leisure aircraft. The impact on the local communities as such is not too significant. The Dakota has two 1200 horsepower engines, and sound containment is hardly an imperative for wartime aircraft. I would urge members to reject officer recommendations or condition the consent to limit aircraft movement from a museum to the minimum needed for maintenance.
1 minute.
Memory Industrial Estate should never have been allowed to exist in its current format. It is an unfortunate historical accident that it does. Sadly, many of the occupiers have no sense of responsibility to the AONB, biodiversity, or the rights of local residents to a peaceful existence. It is a 14-kilometre round trip to junction 14 of the M4, across a country lane, an unclassified road, and then a badly potholed B4000 caused by heavy traffic, where there have been 2 serious accidents in the last couple of months.
And in conclusion,
both involving HGVs with thankfully no loss of life. I state this not just for this application, but for others that I know are being contemplated. This cannot be allowed to continue.
Excellent timing. Thank you, Councillor Bell.
Not my timing, sir. But I felt I might have to get moved on, I admit.
Right. Thank you, our presenters who come along this evening, and we now move on to any questions of the officers. So if I could do them in two phases. Mr. Brown first, and then we'll come on to Mr. Goddard on transport issues. So first up is Councillor Dockman.
Thank you. It's been a really interesting conversation this evening. I'm trying to focus on reserve matters, and the one thing that I feel is reserve matters, and I'll look for your guidance on this, is around the flooding, so flooding and drainage. And a number of presentations have mentioned the water runoff and the flooding drainage issues. So a number of people tonight have. I note in 6.19 and 6.20 of our papers that we're told that the changes to attenuation based on 5, but I'm just trying to get my head around the 6.2, that I believe local flood authority that this is acceptable in principle, and the technical details of the proposed SUDs would be dealt with in a future submission of an application to approve detailed reserve conditions 13 of the Outline Planning Commission. Can you just tell me, in relationship to what I've heard this evening about flood and water runoff, what that means and what will happen?
Sure, yeah. Strictly speaking, drainage would be something that is relevant at the outline because it's a fundamental issue. But clearly, the landscaping of the land around the building is going to have an impact on that. So what we have here is a condition of the Outline Planning Commission that is for the like we do with all planning commissions, detailed drainage strategy, where our drainage entity is looked at detailed calculations, etc., to make sure it all works. So that's been looked at under the condition on the outline. But what we've done, bearing in mind that the landscaping is quite a large area site potentially has a bearing, they've also checked the proposals here to just sense check them and make sure that nothing that is being proposed here undermines the detailed land drainage strategy that's being looked at under that condition.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Yeah, I know it's a bit.
Yes, no, that was why I was just just a clarification point. So that will be dealt with under that particular condition in the outline. But
we've double checked that nothing on the plan here causes them any concern based on that. Bear in mind they're looking at this now and they've got that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. We're awaiting determination, I think, on 3 other packages of reserved matters. And whilst I respect the fact that we're supposed to be focusing on 4 elements tonight, I'm not really sure how we can decide on things like layout if we don't have a travel plan, because presumably we need to know vehicle movements and so on, and whether we're going to have a bus or cycles or whatever before we can decide on how many parking spaces we need. And landscaping, how can we discuss landscaping if we don't have all the information we need about sites? How can we consider landscaping where we don't have the carbon condition to consider in front of us? And presumably, is it the case, can I ask obviously, when these other packages come forward, if they're all objected to, are we going to find ourselves coming back 4 separate times to look at 4 separate packages of reserved matters for this application? And Chairman, if I may ask another question. We've obviously got the draft local plan that's gone out to consultation at the moment, and I know part of the ESA2, we've got some land west of Ramsbury Road. Could officers please clarify where this site relates to that site? Is it the same site or do they adjoin one another? How far apart are they, etc.? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Who would like to answer those questions?
Right, we go first. I think I've noted them all down. Do let me know if I've missed any. There was a point made in relation to the discharge of conditions relating to SUDs and how can we improve layout and landscaping. As Bob has just alluded to, we have received quite a bit of detail about the SUDs that are proposed. Those have been looked at by the lead local flood authority, who have confirmed to us that the layout, i.e. in the landscaping, the size of the basin on the ground wouldn't need to change. It's just how that it operates in a technically restricted manner that they will be approving through the conditions discharge. So it is not expected that the layout will be altered by the SUDS condition. If details, for whatever reason, cannot be approved under the SUDS condition and there is subsequently a need to change the layout, then the applicants will have to come back in and seek to change the reserve methods of layout or landscaping, depending on which it affects.
And the fact that we haven't got the travel plan yet, how does that affect the landscaping? Surely we need one to understand how many parking spaces we need, for example. And the other one was the zero carbon. How can we decide on these things tonight?
Yes,
We don't know. Yeah.
So in terms of the travel plan, I don't know whether Paul might want to correct me here, but Paul had, in his response as local highway authority officer, has looked at how many employees, potential employees there are working at the site at any one time, and confirmed that the parking proposed is acceptable in terms of numbers. I assume that takes into account any potential reduced numbers as a result of travel planning. The carbon and the landscaping, the condition relating to carbon was in terms of the building approved to meet zero carbon development for its construction, monitoring, reporting. But it's not related to the landscaping. If they struggle, the applicant struggles at a later date to achieve a zero carbon or BREEAM even for the building, and they need to change the design, they'll have to come back and seek an amendment to those designs that are being and the other conditions discharge applications, yes, they're all currently under consideration. One of them, I believe, is due to come to this committee. Was originally forecast to come on tonight's committee, but was withdrawn, awaiting consultation responses. If we receive warrants and objections and we recommend approval of it, discharge, then they will be brought to this committee for determination. Otherwise, they will be dealt with under delegated powers, unless the development control manager decides otherwise.
And the other one was about the local plan.
Yeah, which I think you were looking at.
I'm hunting desperately to find you an actual map rather than describe it.
Yeah, I'm happy to wait for an answer to that.
We'll come back to you. That's right.
Thank you.
But members, I'll just run down, there's quite a few questions to be asked. Got Councillor Cole, Councillor Abbs, Councillor Beck, Councillor Camp in that order, as long as you're happy. So happy with that order. Right, we'll go with Councillor Cole first.
Thank you, Chairman. Mention of a single small reed bed. Is it small? And will that be the only means of dealing with foul water? Trees, heavy standard trees are not mature, but we understand what we're talking about. But how does the council intend to monitor the tree planting over 15 years? After all, one would expect that anything that dies off should be replaced annually. Are we going to take a look annually? A hedgerow, 60% being removed, 15-year-old hedgerow. 15-year-old hedgerow, you can actually transplant it. I say this because I've physically done it myself using a digger. Would we consider insisting that that's be done, the plants be reused? The museums become actually quite interesting. It's strange to have read out a document that obviously is superseded by what's been said this evening, but it does show that the development of this planning application over time, in the development, things have changed. We're being told this evening something slightly different about this museum. Interesting to me. If it's going to be interesting, surely 10 parking spaces is not going to be enough. So I'd be interested to hear your comment on that one. Thank you, Chairman.
I think, again, for answer, we can consider all this in debate and apply some conditions and see how that goes with our officers and legal and what have you. Good point.
Does Mr. Goddard want to comment on the 10 parking spaces?
Yeah,
I can do. As the applicants mentioned during their presentation, the museum will be opened at weekends. when there'll be less employees from the commercial use on the site. So altogether, there are some 100 parking spaces really too. So if there are less employees there, I consider there's more than enough parking for the museum across the site.
The museum is only operative over a weekend.
Yes, we've been told.
Even with a counter there for work. Okay. The other stuff I was asking, could we have some comments about what's feasible?
Can I just point out to members that the public access to the museum is being controlled by condition 17 of the outline planning permission, whereby we're requiring details of public arrangements for public access to be provided and approved in writing. And it requires the museum to be open on no less than 28 days per year. Our detailed arrangements of how it can be booked on the public side.
And the other question?
In terms of the reed bed, I believe this is the only means of foul water treatment. A foul water statement has been put in as part of the application submission. Obviously, it's not as though sewage is just pumped into a reed bed. There is a treatment plant process that it goes through, and that's where it leads to, is that reed bed. Whether that's considered small or large, I think it's relative in terms of the landscaping in the site, bearing in mind that you have a few thousand square meters of woodland proposed in relation to that. Reed bed is relatively small. In trees and monitoring trees over the 15-year period, there is a condition on the outline planning permission requiring a landscape and ecological management plan that will detail how the landscaping is to be managed. And lastly, in terms of the hedgerow and relocation of the hedgerow, there is nothing to stop the applicant.
Mr. Brown, could you just give us the page where that is stated? I'm getting a nod here about disagreement on the management plan.
Well, the question I was asking, not what plan to be put forward was, but how the council was going to monitor it.
So the council has its abilities under its enforcement team to take action should it not be adhered to, and it's made aware of issues and conditions not being adhered to. But the landscape and ecological management plan does set out details of a body or organisation that's responsible for the implementation of that plan, who does the ongoing monitoring and remedial measures, as set out in condition 11 of the outline planning permission.
I interrupted. I'll let you continue.
Relocation of hedgerow. The applicants could certainly use some of the existing hedgerow to be replanted, provided it accords with their soft landscaping plan that they have proposed. I think that is everything.
Right, good. We come on to Councillor Abbott.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm really struggling with this term broadly, because broadly is what. So what I'd really like the officers to do is to tell me why it's something that has different accesses, different dimensions, all these things have changed, different traffic movements, our use of an aircraft coming in, and I think, well, 5, we don't consider it much. How many of these things have to be on top of each other before it does not be broadly aligned to what was agreed and outlined? In other words, what would have to have been done for this to have come back and not meet the outline? And please don't use the word broadly.
I think it's a matter of scale and degree in terms of what you interpret broadly to mean. And please don't use that word. And unfortunately, that is, the beauty in the grey area of planning that does exist is looking at things in the round, and it's the scale and degree. I have to stress that at the outline stage, what was shown was indicative. What was considered crucial to be secured was secured by conditions such as the height of the building, such as the square meterage of the floor area that related directly in part to the traffic generation. Those elements that were considered important at the outline stage were were controlled by condition. And also the landscaping assessments provided at the outline stage that did also consider the indicative access through the woodland belt and the loss of that woodland trees. It clearly states that in the landscaping visual impact assessments. That's those, because we required those assessments to be undertaken at the outline stage because of the concerns with the AONB. We wanted to make sure that the scheme couldn't evolve so much that the landscaping visual impact would be so greatly different that we'd end up with a different scheme and a greater impact. I mean, as it was, as we went through this application, given the changes that have taken place, such as the relocated access, the slight change in the width, reduction in the width of the building, but elongation of the length of the building, we did ask for an updated landscaping visual appraisal to ensure that that impact was suitably considered under landscaping in this reserve matters application. So I'm afraid there's no prescriptive sort of set of rules as to what's considered broadly or not. Members can take are welcome to take a bit different view. I would.
That's great. Do you mind if I just ask a supplementary question? Where I think I've got what you're saying there. Broadly, is something that you can determine and we can determine, and they can mean different things.
It is ultimately a matter of judgment, right?
So therefore, that follows on to the next one. If we were minded to say no to this application this evening, under what, you know, how would you support it in rejecting? What would you suggest that we reject?
Well, I think that's a decision I think we've got to make, and these gentlemen will decide whether we've gone the right way. Otherwise, it could be going in. Well,
I think.
I'll try and answer. I mean, I would focus on the merits of what the design of what's before you. Like, go back to what I said before, you're looking at the detailed design. The fact that the access has moved, for example, is, I mean, if there's no harm by it moving, or the harm is found acceptable because of the benefits of the application, then I don't think you should be looking to refuse it on the matter that it's.
Okay.
I think
that's fine.
It's an extreme example on the general.
No, let's just move on because the debate permits anyway, and there's other people want to ask questions. So we've heard two sets of numbers tonight to do with aircraft meeting movement. One from 0. Mr. Walker offered to basically strip the museum, that's air movement. At least what I heard. 5, which is the number used when it's presented, but that turned out to be air movements, not ground movements. And 10, which is one of what the objectives used.
12 conditions that are built in. Sorry, number 12.
Yeah, do you mind if I ask the opposite then?
Yeah, I understand.
So at what point do you become concerned about the number of aircraft movements? Because at 5 you were.
The applicant has proposed and confirmed to us that there'll be a total of 10 aircraft movements, 5 in, 5 out.
So 10.
And officers have assessed that proposal and consider that ancillary to the museum use and have conditioned those number of aircraft movements, not flights, just aircraft movements via the taxi.
So, but the applicant was all, okay, all right, we'll go back to it. I think I'm done.
Okay. I'd like to come back in this at this stage because this whole business of aircraft movement, as I see it, it's the movement of the aircraft out of the museum, out past, possibly, or onto and out past the red line. Now, as far as this committee is concerned, what happens once it goes past the red line, and I'll be corrected here, is nothing for us to consider. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Chairman, this application doesn't purport to approve any development outside of the red line.
Thank you.
Clearly, it's connecting to land adjacent. It is a separate matter. If there's the lawful permission and other consents on the land, present on the land next door to fly however many aircraft in and out of that airfield, then that's already in existence. That could happen now, and it just couldn't come onto the site.
Am I right that then comes under the CAA?
Any other legislation that
Any other
applies, we don't
legislation?
need to do it as the planning authority.
Kevin, I understand that from condition 12, that on the basis of an assumption about aircraft flights,
we can only control the numbers, as you say, of movements across
The red
the
line.
red line.
Thank you.
But
Please stay focused.
you know, we can't control the flights, but we can control the movements, and we have to make some sort of common sense assumption about why you would want to cross that red line.
But the movements may be moving the aircraft out for display on the hard standing. I don't, that's the grey area again. That's, I think, Councillor Beck. Thank you. Is moving the aircraft out of the museum for display a movement? Or is a movement considered? Movement out onto the hard standing to take it across the red area, the red line. Something for debate. I will now move on to Councillor Vickers, your question.
I don't think I need to ask the question.
Thank you, Councillor Beck.
Thank you, John. I agree with you. I think this whole question that Jake Brown sort of officially mentioned the word were anticipated aircraft movements. Now, we've heard actually from Mr. Walker, correct me if I'm wrong, that it is not the intention to house this Dakota aircraft within the museum. So it'll be outside, when I say all the time. And I believe you are perfectly correct that if this permission had been granted 2 years ago and this operation was fully established, walkers would be fully entitled to cross that red line and go on to the memory, what is known as a memory, and take off, as many times as I like. I'd like to clarify on page 160, the officer could do this, of the papers, under 6.34, the second line. How do you interpret this thing? It is not considered that the number of aircraft movements, is it 105 or 10 per annum? Is it 10 or legally, could somebody challenge it? That we're saying it's 105 per annum.
It's a 10 equal to or less than 10. It's a simple thing, you can less than.
Okay. But I think one of the main things is that when assuming that committee determined to actually approve officers' recommendations, would we have Mr. Brown's comments with regarded anticipated aircraft movements? We anticipated anticipated aircraft air movement as opposed to ground movement. If they may want to actually move this plane about, literally, because for argument's sake, the concrete needs repair or something else, they'll have to shift it. So somebody legally could say that is one movement, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah. If I may, I think I understand your point. If we have it, your point is if you have it parked outside and then you move it 10 meters down, is that a movement?
No, technically, legally, it is.
Well, no, I think the intent there with movements, like we would say with any other traffic movements, is in and out of the site.
If 5 minutes beyond the red line.
It's very light, but there's air movements, that does away with any legal challenge.
We'll bring it up in the debate and then we'll go round.
One further.
Let's just clarify this point first.
I've got one further point.
Yeah, we'll bring that one up in a minute.
If I may.
Hold on, Councillor.
I think the intent there was movement on and off site. So if members vote tonight to approve it with that condition, we can, with your consent, look at tweaking the wording, so that's absolutely. I wouldn't say air movements because the point is we're not permitting anything to be off the air. That's not happening on this site. We can look at the wording to make sure. Yeah, just all movements on the ground.
On page, Chairman, on page 164, under item 7, material. This is a question of the materials to be used in the development hereby permitted shall be as specified on the plans. There's no mention in here about samples to be submitted for prior approval, which is a normal situation. And I would feel that needs to be incorporated somehow or other. Maybe it already is somewhere in a massive wording, I don't know. But if it isn't, I would suggest that we do so.
Yeah, okay.
Perfect, valid point for debate. We do have different conditions that we can apply.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hold on.
I'll keep you brief. Paul, just a quick question for you. Obviously, I guess the issue of traffic flows and movements was fully addressed at the initial application stage.
Yes.
And considered. Has anything, because this has been raised by a number of the objectors and also in questions, the issue of traffic volumes flows, has anything material changed in your view between that initial outline having been sent and this application for reserve issues that would materially affect your opinion on that?
No,
yes or no?
no, Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was it.
Councillor Paul will come back.
Yeah, the response about the local plan, I don't know if Mr. Trees has a chance. And then I've got a couple of other very quick questions, if that's all right.
By repeating it to make sure I give the right answer.
Yeah, so it's just to clarify, the new policy ESA 2, is this site that we're discussing tonight the site that's in the local plan, or is it adjacent to it? Or?
I'll show you the, I've got, what I've managed to find now is the policy map showing the extended protected employment area, so I'll just show you that.
Yeah, that would be great, thank you.
With me 1 moment. I'll show you that it's a bit easier to read because it's not properly on our map yet. That's the existing protected employment area, so you can see the site there.
Okay.
So just for reference, you've got three technically protected employment areas here. The buildings to the south of the site, and then at the top. So if you just bear that in mind when I switch. So it's not the best quality, but you can see it just. You can see the bottom one there. The one where the building is just kind of subsumed there, and it's that side there. So yeah, you have a proposed allocation and an extension to what's currently called a protected employment area, what we call a designated employment area, I believe.
Okay, so what we're considering tonight is part of that new area, but not the whole of that new area.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Gray. That's really helpful. Very quickly, one of the opponents said that the AONB didn't get subsequent opportunities to comment. They just got the one opportunity before it was proposed to cut down the trees where the aircraft are going. Can you clarify, did the AONB get another opportunity to comment?
The AONB have been consulted on this application. I'm not aware of any trees being cut down. That's been claimed.
Where the aircraft go in and out.
Yes, I mean, they're certainly still there. They're shown on the site photographs, I put in the presentation, and we listed on the site.
So in your view, when the AONB commented, they had that plan in front of them, so they knew that strip was going to be cut out?
Yes, both this application and the outline.
Right, okay. And very quickly, last comment. On the flooding, when we've looked at the flooding, have we modelled it on the basis of the fact there's going to be a large concrete area now, and what impact that might have on runoff?
Those would have been part of the detailed calculation. It's the increase in impermeable surface that's being made.
Right. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any more questions? Just an observation from myself. Councillor Cole intimated that there might be a little bit, I use my words, not yours, a little bit of planning by stealth with regards to the museum, with regards to new information coming forward. It's a museum not just for the storage of an aeroplane, with the addition of tanks and cracks and uniforms and what have you.
I did, but I actually thought it was a good thing.
You did indeed. But I think, and not it's my position to try and aid anybody with the success of their application or aid anybody who's objecting to the application. But to be fair to the applicant, Welford old aerodrome and what is now the munitions dump, as you might know, has got a museum there which has been asked to halve its volume. The mezzanine floor's gone. There's a lot of artifacts in there. Now, I have dealings with Welford because it's in my ward, and I was under the understanding, having talked to those volunteers, that they had been in discussion with Mr. Walker and his son, whether they would be interested in taking some of that stuff for the museum. Now, I think the museum is really going to concentrate on the memory RAF details, as opposed to anything that went on at Aldermaston or Harwell or Welford. So some of the stuff has gone elsewhere. Whether or not some of it from Welford is going to go to memory, I don't know. But to be fair, I think it was always the reason of that museum being there to hold other artifacts as well, not just the aircraft. And I'd say that in passing, that I was aware of it. how the agent presents that museum to us is entirely up to him. Now, whether he should have done a slightly bigger expansion of what's going in there apart from the aeroplane, that will be left to the debate between the agent and the applicant. But that's my understanding. It was always going to hold other things other than the aeroplane. So I think that draws
Sorry, Chairman.
questions to.
I did have one more.
To
okay. It's to do with these diagrams, and it was mentioned earlier that the space inside doesn't appear to accord to the. The question is, well, I can't read it. I haven't got my reading glasses in, and it's too small. So, sorry, getting old. What are these little things? This is solar.
That actually shows the roof of the building. That's plan, and it shows solar panels and roof.
It is the solar. Good. Not windows. And
well, there are roof lights
so
there as well.
Can you confirm, rather, that's the best way of asking it, that the space, the line here that's shown is a solid wall from ceiling to floor, separating.
I think it shows a door in one of the plans. But that's the condition.
Other than a door.
Well, we
They're completely set. Well, not a condition. I'm just trying to get confirmation. There is that proper wall there, segregated space between what we consider the museum.
There's an indication that internally there is some sort of demarcated difference between the uses. Distribution.
Okay.
I think I can elaborate on that. So the conditions on the outline secure the floor space, the respective floor space for the A and the B1. Internal changes don't normally require planning permission. So by our assessment, it's sufficient to have the floor plates with what we generate with small bag construct. It's sufficient for planning purposes to have that secured. If members feel it is necessary to retain a dividing space between the two, and they're happy that they can justify that in planning terms, then they may wish to debate whether they impose a condition to literally secure the internal layout. At the moment, it basically says the condition has maximum floor space for the area. So in theory, it could be whether
just for my clarity, that could be a piece of tape on the floor then.
Yeah, it'd be unconditional use. If members feel it's necessary to go further, then that's that we take into consider a condition for potentially.
Well,
Members, I think
that's quite a big difference, isn't it?
I think we apply a little common sense here. If you've got a warehouse with expensive equipment and gear in there that's of high expense, you're not going to put a piece of tape to keep the public out when you've got the museum open. I mean, would you hold your you wouldn't run your warehouse like that. So I think we apply a little common sense. I have one question. All done. Any questions of Mr. Goddard, who's been not very lively?
We dare so, Chairman.
Good.
Thank you.
Not that I want to go down this avenue. Tricks has been mentioned many times. Tricks hasn't been applied by a gentleman over there, Mr. Whatever. Can you give me some indication? Not that we should be looking at these transport issues, but I'm just intrigued. Tricks.
I can. TRICS stands for Trick Rate Information Computer System. It's a database covering traffic surveys of all different uses across the UK and Ireland. Normally, I would say to you in any proposal, from reference to the TRICS database, we project that this proposal will generate this number of vehicle movements. Normally, a planning application would be assessed that way at outline stage. But with this proposal, what Walkers did is they took surveys of their own uses, their own traffic generations, and they said, if we increase the size of the building accordingly, it would increase the traffic accordingly. So what that did is it produced traffic figures far less than what normally TRICS would produce. For a B8 warehouse and distribution use, to make sure it stayed with Walkers and did not become a general B8 warehouse and distribution use, the personal consent that has been mentioned was applied.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, I bring that up because it was mentioned and I want our objectors and everybody else to go away and Woodland to go away and know that we have asked the questions of things that they brought up and not left it dormant and said he didn't bring that up and they didn't discuss it or whatever. So that's the reason I asked that question.
Kevin, can I clarify on that? So if they get the personal permission tonight, if somebody else then takes on that warehouse, would they have to come back to us and look at the tricks data and have a new commission?
The personal condition is on the outline. The restriction is already applied.
Right.
If it was to be applied by someone else, then yes, they would need to apply to the council and we would assess that on its merits.
Okay, right,
thank you.
Chairman, I have to say that I'm finding it very difficult to listen to officers and members when I've got people talking behind me all the time.
Yeah. I can't, I'm not picking them up, but please just turn around and say.
Yeah, maybe my hearing, but it's very distracting.
Yeah, we just.
It's not helping.
We apologise, Mr. Chairman, it's just natural
relief.
when some things are being
As
said.
generous as I can, but now councillor gets brought out, and I could hear it, and it's disrupted, but it's a major issue that we're discussing this evening, and I don't want to antagonise the situation, if you know what I mean. Right, we've got there in the end. We're going to get down to the debate. So who'd like to start the debate on this one, and where we're going to go? Thank you, councillor Cole. Well done.
The museum seems to have been the big starting point here. And I get the feeling that actually it's not as bad as it sounds. If they're not going to house that Dakota there, but bring it in occasionally, it's not quite the same sort of issue as aircraft being housed there and going out, well, rather a lot more than 5 return trips a year. That would not have been acceptable locally. Museum that is now described and an aircraft coming in occasionally feels a bit better to me. The trees and hedges stuff could be dealt with. We could certainly put in some conditions. I don't think the monitoring of this has been seriously considered by the council yet. It is an issue. It's an issue not just on this one, but lots of other places where we require trees to go in, they die off, and maybe something is done and maybe not. Which is why I'm asking the question here on this one. I'll go along with parking for the museum. It all sounds pretty good, right? But I was a little bit worried by the one small leak bed, but if we're actually being told that there's a proper Clargister type system going in to handle the necessary for all those staff daily, if that's correct, officers, then I'm sure for a reed bed to take the out there won't be no problem at all. Actually, what worries me more is what we're told we can't discuss, which is that the thing has changed over time and there's a lot more car movements, heavy vehicle movements. And this I don't get. So I'd be interested to hear what others have to say. My ward is also impacted because the B4000 goes down through my ward as well. And yes, my residents are seeing a vast amount more traffic. So I'd be interested to hear what others have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. We had a very interesting debate this evening.
Please turn your phone off, thank you.
Right.
I did ask everybody to turn their phones off before they came in.
Yes, the points which Councillor Cole has just mentioned, I fully agree with. There is no doubt that I would suggest that we all in this room are a lot clearer now than we were at 6 o'clock this evening, as with regard to the full intention of using these potential premises. For example, and when we clearly got the impression that it was the intention to hangar an aircraft. In fact, the term hangar is commonly used in the papers. Well, that is not going to take place. The museum is clearly, a defined objective of the Walker family, and it should be highly recommended because, as you say, we are losing one in the district already, and they are vital for the future of our children and our children's children, that this lot is maintained. Taking everything into account, Chairman, I would sort of propose that this committee accept officers' recommendations with the requisite amendments to suit the various technical points that have been raised during our meeting, such as movements of aircraft to be I'm suggesting air movements as one example, as opposed to just movements, which could mean anything. And that, with that, Chairman, I will say no more.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. I go down now to Councillor Barnett.
Chairman, members, without reiterating points which Councillor Cole and Councillor Beck have said, I've always said, and I will remain saying so, it's paramount that members actually visit these sites and to get a grasp of the site in its entirety. And in this case, of course, I did along with several other members, and I think it's very valuable. But also tonight, as Councillor Beck said, we perhaps come here with views on what we've read, what we perhaps assume to be the case. But tonight it was quite clear that a thorough debate has been had, and also information that's been fed to us from the various quarters, which we perhaps weren't aware of before. I know I have to say it's influenced me to a certain extent. And I think some of the points that you made, Chairman, I think also perhaps not totally relevant, but partially relevant, because we are members of West Berks Council, and we do like to see a heritage of West Berks. And you mentioned the various airfields and what's already kept, housed and on display for people to see. And I think it's imperative that we allow these items to be presented, whether it's local, whether it's national, but kept with a heritage of some of the airfields that are actually in our patch. And comments that I felt are quite relevant in relationship to the aircraft movements, and I think actually that was put forward by Mr. Walker. A lot of the movements will be very dependent on the weather. An airfield which perhaps can be accessed by hard standing, but as an airfield which is soft, it's going to be very dependent on the weather. And I think it could be a case an aircraft might not actually be there for a long period of time during the year, or might end up being there for a long period of time, being there for a long period of time before it's actually moved. So, you know, overall, I have to say I'm actually going along with Councillor Beck, and I'm inclined to approve this application, the reserve matters application.
Yes, I've got, I'm waiting, thanks to Dr. He did put a hand up, and I've just got, I put it down as a speaker later, not as a seconder. I took Councillor Barnett first. My concern is when we have early proposers and seconders, we don't often hear the whole debate, which may sway us one way or the other. And I don't want to propose a
That's why I
lay weight. But I am happy if I've got Councillor Count, Councillor Abbs next to speak. Councillor Count, I don't know whether you'd like to say that before I take a second, or you're quite happy at this stage to take a second, because you might like to put an argument against, and I'll say the same to Councillor Abbs.
No, I'd just like to, just a few words in the sense that some of the early concerns about traffic volumes and flooding being, I think, addressed by officers in my mind. And that's tied in with the personal permission term that applies to walkers on this site. And I was particularly impressed with the commitment of the family to the area over such a long period and ongoing. And on that basis, I'd be inclined to support the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. What I would like to ask is, we had a lot of discussion within the questions and answers, a lot of considerations of conditions, and I've not heard any yet. So I'd like to broach conditions. I would like to start with movements. Sorry.
Yeah. But should we have, I think, there's been a proposal. Yeah. Do we want to go back to Councillor Beck, the he did mention conditions.
Yes,
didn't he?
I'm concerned, yeah.
And maybe let's list them, and then we'll have a second, and then I would propose we continue the debate.
Thank
because I
you.
think not enough to
Yeah.
have second.
Yeah, I think you're right. So conditions.
If there is a second.
Well, one condition I would recommend to be considered is that this term of aircraft movements, the limitation of 5 in and 5 out. This should be specified as being air movements and not ground movement.
Or movement over the red line.
Yes, okay, all right.
Thank you.
The other one, Chairman, is the question of that any materials which are to be used have to be samples have to be approved, physically by the officers prior to giving them approval to use them.
Thank you.
That is not in
Yeah, and someone also mentioned amendment to condition 9.
Yeah.
Sorry?
There's another suggestion about an amendment earlier in the evening.
That's the top line, 15 years in the update, that's already part of the officer recommendation. The other one was councillor Ad.
I'm not happy because I still do not understand how West Berkshire Council is going to ensure that it happens.
Shall we ask for a second since we've had a proposal, and then we're going to continue the debate? If there's no second.
Are you happy
I'll
for more
leave.
conditions?
I don't know what. Chairman?
We're going to have to continue the debate, but we've had a proposal, so we do need to ask for a second.
Yeah.
Because
I'm not too keen on a second going straight away. I'm reasonably happy for the debate to continue for a while, but I will take it on.
does need to continue.
It does need to continue, absolutely. So I have a second now.
Chairman, the point is, another condition which has been raised, this question of others. That any trees, bushes, etc. That die within, normally our conditions are 5 years. In this case, it's been put for 15 years. I have absolutely no disagreement with that whatsoever.
Thank you.
I appreciate Councillor Cole's question as to how this council actually monitor that. I feel that is something quite outside this particular committee meeting.
Thank you. I will now take, do I have a second to support? Are you going to hold on? Councillor Bett's proposal.
I was going to actually say, when I've been looking through, and I'm trying very hard to distinguish between what's already been agreed and what we've got here as reserved matters. And I think it's been really interesting to hear everybody's point of view on that, and some of the sort of areas. I mean, the flood piece was the piece that I'd sort of picked up on. I thought that was well answered. And I also agree, I think the red line condition is an important piece to give the assurance that we know exactly how many crossings that entails and what that entails. But there's obviously quite a bit of confusion in the room. But I was happy to second this proposal. I think that as far as the reserve matters are concerned, what we're considering here tonight, that the points have been addressed and the conditions support that.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think you brought that question up, and I can ask Mr. Dray what we're addressing with regard to access, what we're addressing apart to a period, what we're addressing as part of
I think there's been quite a lot of
and layout. So we again, right from my first introduction to this sticky focus.
Chairman, I'll clarify the proposal so it can be properly seconded before moving on to the debate. So the proposal, as I've recorded, is to accept off the recommendation, which is as per the update. So that includes the change to the 15-year on the landscape condition. Refine the wording of the condition that stipulates the play movements. And I would rather than say air movements, I would say on and off site, words to that effect. To change the materials condition to submit a schedule and sample of materials for approval. But they're the ones I've recorded down. That's the proposal. I will just highlight that the other condition that we've talked about, which hasn't been included in your proposal yet, or if you choose to, was about the internal layout being fixed as per the proposed floor plan, and there being some kind of divider there. But it's your decision whether you want to include that with the proposal or not before it's seconded. Thank you.
Right, I now will continue. Councillor Absalom.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, I'm slightly in disbelief with what I'm hearing this evening. We have had an offer that addresses a huge amount of the residents' concern of not having Dakota. So no, don't need to condition. He offered to say, well, if the residents don't want it, don't have, well, that's the dog. That's what he said. He's quite happy for the Dakota not to be there. It removes a huge amount of the concerns of the local resident. Okay, we don't have to debate it. He offered it. The only question was, can we condition it? But so that's the number one thing, and that removes so many of the issues that were raised. Secondly, we're talking. He said, well, this plane will only ever sit outside now, so therefore we don't have to worry about the use of the internal hangar, because that's the static display, and so that can be conditioned as no movement of aircraft in and out of that space. We could do that. So, because of course, you know, we're talking about Dakota, but he might acquire another plane. I don't know. I mean, you know, we really don't know the future, but he's offered not to do anything in and out of there. Secondly, if we look at the layout of that building as it's in the plans, now we talk about, parking, there'll be plenty of parking because it'll be a popular museum. Well, one's at one end of the building and one's at the other. And without being able to say how people will by foot get from one end of the building to the other, which is directly across the lorry traffic movements, it's really difficult to. Sorry, Mr. Kent, what's up?
Come on, carry on. Don't be distracted.
When you finish. Oh, thank you. That'd be nice. So then we hear from local residents. We're not guessing about flooding issues. We're told categorically it does. We're also told that John Wood Stanley, one of our senior officers, is currently investigating. But we're all of a sudden not worried about flooding issues. And if anybody had actually visited, and a few of us that go to the regular applications that come at memory services and actually look at the traffic that we have to experience every time we're up there, we'll know it's a heavily used, illegally used entrance and exit from memory services. And it's a nightmare up there for lorries already. So adding more to it in the way that is now being suggested, you know, without doing a proper tricks assessment, you know, it's just, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot. So we're going ahead now, and all of the debate so far is, oh yeah, we can do this. Well, we can actually, you know, go the other way. You know, we could say, oh, actually, the way it's presented, it is significantly different. And that's this broad term that was used. It's broadly equivalent. Well, I would argue that it's broadly not equivalent to what was brought forward at outline. And apparently my opinion is as good as anybody else's in the word, when we use the word broadly. So we add all these things together. We've got real examples from real people who live locally who don't want it, and for very significant reasons. And yet we're sitting here blindly going, okay, we'll just try and put a condition. We'll try and think of the conditions that will stop it. And I would much rather we debated fully first and actually gone, okay, you know, on balance, because this is what this committee is. It's an on balance decision. Do we think, you know, officers recommended is right? Do we believe the resident? On balance, I come down on behalf of the residents. This is not sound in its current form. It would be a lot sounder if we did take up the offer of Mr. Walker of not having the Dakota on site at all. Lots of the other stuff that was mentioned about the museum sounds very interesting to me, but I'd still have safety concerns. I'd still want to add all that traffic because it seems to be undocumented. It was nothing to do with his vehicle movements. It's an additional use which is untested. So so tricks data would have been a lot safer to use, as it turns out, than what we are using. So yeah, no, unfortunately, we have had something in favour of it. So if that fails, which I doubt it will, I will ask for it to.
No, your contribution is welcome, and members have the opportunity to draft or release your observation.
Oh, can I just finish? There was one piece of mess up. I'm sorry, Councillor, because BREEAM, it's down here is excellent, but it's talking about doing some kind of assessment afterwards, and apparently we can't even talk about it this evening. You know, BREEAM excellent is only achieved if you start out right at the beginning of the planning process and deliver all the paperwork to show that you're going to achieve it. And it's about the build form. Well, it's in here on page, what that page is, yeah. So, you know, but so not to be able to take in CS15 and its applicability to this application this evening, again, it's a bit disappointing, but that's more of a personal comment, I guess.
I'll hold that point with the officers, Councillor Vickers.
Thank you very much. Because I understand Councillor Abbott's points, and I'm really wondering whether if we agreed to withdraw the aircraft, I mean, fine, the applicant may
offer anything, but it seems to me to fundamentally change the application that's before us, if that were to be the case. Now, of course, he's free to do that as a separate application, you know, an application with no aircraft, but it's sat there on the outline plan, sitting on that forecourt, and I don't think we can actually make a condition to this application that removes the aircraft. It's sort of too fundamental to my mind. I understand where it's coming from. Personally, I hate air shows, but I know kids and lots of other people love them, and I wouldn't want to take away their enjoyment. I had a fear that Membry would be the location of an air show, but it's not, not in the application. And I'm very much reassured by what I've learned today, both in the update report that I've got round to reading today, and then more importantly from the applicant, that this is just somewhere that the plane will come to for occasional museum type demonstrations as a static display. And I can understand why it would need to go somewhere else to be based and service and all of that. And that would necessarily mean flights. It's unreasonable to expect the whole thing to be dismantled and taken by road, just, you know, be reassembled and maintained. Just totally unreasonable. So we have an application before us for a museum which fundamentally includes a plane. It's there on the outside. Now, if people had a problem with that, I can agree that there wasn't a full discussion of that aspect at the outline, and if it is a fundamental part of the application, that is a problem. But I'm afraid that's water under the bridge. I think maybe, you know, we had approved it, and you know, maybe we should have discussed it further. But I am content with what I've learned today from a very excellent report and a presentation by officers, and very informative and well-mannered and helpful presentations by all our speakers. I think we're in danger of reopening the original outline application, which, whether we liked it or not, is there. I hate the idea of more traffic on the B4000, and I like the idea that Councillor Abbs raised at outline that we, the government, highways agency, should do something about control of access on and out the Membry service station, because that is a large part of the traffic problem. And we've got to deal with that before we deal with the things which are within our control. But I would like to see BREEAM, because I believe BREEAM does involve movements generated by a non-residential site. So I think if there are significant movements generated by this site from the change in the numbers, whether or not we've got outline consent, I think we should condition that through the BREEAM application. And maybe Mr. Gray will come back and say whether that's possible. But I'm worried about the overall operational zero carbon footprint of this. I think the landscaping is excellent, and on balance, I think will improve the appearance of the site from what it was originally, and in no ecological terms and has the potential in drainage terms. But we're not deciding the drainage condition tonight, and I can see it linked with landscape very intimately and with ecology. But that's not the decision. I have to accept the professional drainage officer saying that he can't see any reason why there should be significant changes to layout or landscape when he comes to finally approve the technical aspects of the drainage. So on balance, I would go with the application with those additional conditions about the internal barrier to make sure that the change of use of that part of the building cannot happen. And also, if you like, that all the display, when it is a museum, is outside and not inside, because it looks like there's some goodies to go on the internal space from what we heard from the applicant, you know, World War vehicles and so on. I think that's enough, but I thought it was important to deal with Councillor Abbs's points, which were, you know, fair.
Just as a point for myself, I think to take the aircraft away would be a total distraction of the museum. My understanding was that the museum was being built to put the aircraft in at times and what have you. I don't remember from the Walker's presentation saying that the aircraft wasn't going in the museum. I don't think it was mentioned. I mean, it can go in or it can go not go in. I mean, if it comes down for a period of time, then it, as far as I'm concerned, I'm quite happy to go in the museum. And other times out on the hard standing. What I would like to consider, I don't know whether we can do it outside of the red line though, is this whole business of tugging this aircraft to a start and finish position. So we're going to tug it out of the museum, tug it to the red line, and it will be tugged, as we understand, 800 yards down on the runway. Now, how far we can condition that this is so far away before it's started up, I will take advice, but I think that's something we ought to look at.
Chair, I think I was on your list.
So just consider that, yeah. Next.
I'm quite taken aback by some of this discussion, Chair.
Yes, please.
I'm quite taken aback by some of the discussion. I mean, in a detached way, I think a philanthropic offer to set up a museum and bring back the history of memory on site to where it belonged in the war, to bring back a play that was actually there by Mr. Walker seems a very generous and philanthropic thing to do for the local community, frankly. I don't think 10 flights a year for any plane, goodness me, it must be 10 flights every 15 minutes if you throw. 10 flights a year doesn't sound too excessive for getting a plane in and out of the site. And I certainly wouldn't vote for any condition that tried to remove the provision for an aircraft to be visible and to fly in and out on the odd occasion it needs to. And I just don't get that. I think Mr. Walker's offer, as I understood it, as I took it, was okay if the whole thing is what the community doesn't want. We won't do it. However, we don't have a representative sample committee here particularly. And I think it would be a much wider discussion to reach the conclusion the local residents actually didn't want that museum and connection with their locality and their history to be brought to life.
Thank you. I've got two names. Councillor Pulver.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman.
And I'll take that.
Yeah. I would have preferred to have looked at all of the reserved matters together, to be quite honest, because I've still got concerns that one might impact on another, and it would have made more sense to look at them together. I voted against this last time, but I acknowledge that it did receive approval, and therefore the horse has bolted effectively. So part of me feels compelled to vote for it because it's already gone through, even though I opposed it originally. But I have got those remaining concerns. I'm particularly concerned about the fact that we're expanding that area in the local plan, and I feel that we ought to be doing cumulative impact assessment on things like flooding and traffic impact. So, we could have many more warehouses, for example, in the future, and that's going to add to that traffic. And it's potentially possible that if we do a tricks on each of those applications that come forward in that new expanded employment zone, how much traffic would be putting on that road. So, others may disagree with my points and not think that my concerns are necessarily valid, but those are my concerns. So my inclination tonight is to abstain, and I don't like abstaining because I feel like it's a cop-out, but I don't feel I can vote for or against because of the concerns that I've got.
I think we've advised before the local plan, it's not been approved yet, so we should be sort of applying conditions of the local plan that's being considered at this stage when it's not actually being able to implement it. Am I correct?
Chairman, you can give way to emerging policies, but actually that policy goes to the principal development which has been established. So it's kind of doesn't have a bearing on this discussion.
No.
I'm just worried about emission. If we give permission for this tonight, then again you can say to yourself, well, we did that one, we might as well do the next one and then the next one. And
You want to consider yourself then on the other reserve matters that are going to come later if you're in this mindset now. Would you like to come back on the BREEAM issue that was mentioned here, please?
Sure, Kevin. Just to hopefully reassure on the outline planning commission, condition 8 secured that the development hereby approved shall not be occupied until a post-construction review demonstrating that the approved building has achieved the construction standard of BREEAM excellent. It's approved. That is already secured that level on the outline consent, and the same for zero carbon on condition 9 that details of how to achieve zero carbon.
I would like to, I'd like to come on back on this because we have an example of something else that was built to meant to be built to BREEAM excellent Highwood Copse School, and something happened midway and they'd lost the paperwork and all of a sudden they came back, so well, we can't do BREEAM excellence anymore. Is that okay? So by doing it in the way we're doing it, we're trying, again, they could easily just not bother. I'm not saying they would, but they could easily not bother. We lost the paperwork. I mean, it's not for me to judge, but in my short time as being a councillor, I've seen that happen. And that was a council project. It wasn't even someone else's project. But the other point I wanted to make, Chairman, you mentioned about movement, and you're okay with movement out of a D1. Well, movement in and out of a D1 is not actually allowed. A D1, which is actually a class that no longer exists. Because it's supplemented by other classes now. It's only because this application started when it started that we're still calling it a D1, but the D1 doesn't exist in current terms. D1 is for static museum. It's not for something that you go in out as often as you want. Now, pushing with a tug, a Dakota that doesn't fly in and out, which is probably what was presented to us at the outline, is one thing. Starting to talk in this application about flying things in and out, what we can condition and not condition is completely different in my mind. And by the way, no one said no museum. It's just said no Dakota. I didn't remember him saying.
No, I think he said he wouldn't put the aircraft in the museum.
He did say that.
I didn't remember.
He did. He's right over there. Yes, he's right there. I'm pretty sure that's what you said, sir.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you.
These semantics of whether it's D1 or not, and whether it's relevant of going a vehicle out of, whether it's an aircraft or whether it's an armoured vehicle.
The D1 references, because of the timing of the outline commission, it hasn't been changed, but it's been perfected through class, so it doesn't cause us a.
Can you do what Councillor Abs thinks you can't do with this new?
Are you allowed movement in and out of a
what
D1?
you call it now, not a D1? Can you do that?
It's right. The question is whether or not there's a material change of use. So the Outline Planning Commission grants permission for a aircraft museum, and it's within a use class. It could be used for any form of museum whatsoever. It could be presented. It could have originally been presented to us as simply B1, B8.
Sure. So you can take
so any kind of change of use within a use class doesn't need planning permission. It's not development. That's so like the same way that hairdressers you can change to a switch job. That's the principle of having use classes is it gives the flexibility to change within predefined classes without needing to come for permission.
Are you saying that there is a use class within D, or now the new version, whatever it is, that allows for within that class movement, not static?
I'm saying it could be used for any form of museum. That's the first point. So what we've looked at since the movement, have come forward as part of the proposals for the definitive access, we've looked at that to say, well, is that a material change of use? And that our point is that because it's such a small number of movements, it would not be sufficient in our judgment to result in a material change of use that requires planning permission. If it was day in, day out constantly, then the chances are, yes, we would take the view that it's changed of use to a sui generis use as an operational airfield or something like that. I'm trying to think of an example to make the point, but say a helicopter landed in your back garden once every year. That doesn't mean it's suddenly not a house. So it's, I mean, there's a broad church as to what could be considered a museum. We've assessed it on the information we've been given, and we've been told up to a maximum of 10 movements in total, and we've judged that to not be material change of use.
Thank you. Members, I think we've had an extensive debate on this. I'm going to draw a line under it now. We've seen all sides of this argument. We've had very good presentations from our attendees today. I will now ask Mrs. Arnold and Mr. Brown and Mr. Dre just to remind us of the conditions before I put this to the vote.
Yeah, I think it's worth going through the whole proposal and the amendment that Councillor Beck and Councillor Doherty have raised.
The proposal I've got recorded so far is to accept officer's recommendation, which is as per the update report, which includes the changes to the landscaping condition to up to 15 years of maintenance, essentially. Revise the wording of condition, the plain condition. Well, thank you. In order to make sure that it's clear that that means on and off site. Also to change the materials condition so that it's for the prior approval of samples and a schedule to accompany that. So we look at that beforehand. But that's what I've recorded. It's those two changes to the conditions. Just to clarify, Councillor Beck hasn't included as yet as part of the proposal any condition requiring the internal layout to be fixed or there be a dividing wall. So you may wish to consider whether or not you wish to add that as well before it's seconded.
Members feel that should be incorporated on cut out if you like. to be, so.
So I'll record that as a condition that basically says the development essentially in perpetuity, the layout should be fixed as per the floor plan, and that what we'll do is require details of what the divider is to be approved beforehand.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
Councillor Colbert.
Did Councillor Cole still want a condition about the hedge, trying to make use of the existing hedge, and is that a possible condition?
If we're allowed to make a condition.
Could I suggest that you add that as an informative, as something we look at when we discharge, when we approve the landscaping scheme? Is there any possibility? We were approving landscaping. The landscaping scheme is what's been put before you.
That particular one's a practical suggestion. As I said, I've done it myself.
Yeah. I would suggest an amount of landscaping going on there to save some hedge, but anyway. Councillor Abb, finally.
Yes, I'm sure the applicant can come up to the end of not met BREEAM excellent, and certainly have to waste more time coming back to us or to discharge that condition at some other levels. So can we not, or could we not, with the condition that said they should demonstrate the paperwork, the paper trail necessary to achieve BREEAM excellent during the process, so we don't have this edge at the end?
I don't think, because it doesn't strictly relate to any of the reserve matters. Well, I appreciate the point you're making, and indeed, BREEAM excellent does require, it's part of the design process as well. You're right, you get credit for that. Our normal approach is that we, at an application stage, ask for a pre-assessment estimator, which is a very basic to show that it's reasonable to impose a condition. So we do that check at the outline stage, at the original application stage. So I think we've done all that we can as part of the planning commission to secure that. I mean, it does come up where developments get built out, and we always you have requests to amend it, and we assess it on its merits, like we would do if it came up in the application. But I think that's as far as the local planning authority we can go. We've done it. By imposing that condition, we've obviously checked that it was reasonable to apply it. It could be.
We've got CSV to back that up.
I think we've done the best we can.
Councillor Cole.
We are dealing with the look of this thing. The look of this thing includes the glazing and that affects light spillage. Are we covering that in here, or is it going to be covered separately?
That is proposed as a separate condition 11 of the agenda report, requiring a lighting assessment and any mitigation.
We will be dealing with satisfying the AONB at a later stage.
We can certainly make sure that we consult the AONB on those submissions. Whether they provide a response or not, it will be the local planning authority that will be determining whether those submissions are accessible.
What the condition does state is that the scheme should apply to the Institute of Lighting Engineers Environmental Lighting Zone 1, which is the appropriate zone for AONB. So it does secure it at a level that is appropriate.
Just on, I know keep going about the movement of this aircraft. I take it Price. We've discussed this business of tugs, and Mr. Walker said on safety grounds he won't be firing up the engines. Is it on a sound issue? We can put a condition in that these engines will not be started up whilst in the red line.
Kevin, there is
to safeguard and just pacify, obviously, all the residents of their fear of it running and all that. I mean, I've been told it's not safe to do so, but that's fine.
There is already a condition on the outline planning commission that's for a noise management plan. So it could be that is something that the applicants may wish to propose anyway as part of the discharge of that.
Okay, thank you. As long as it's covered, that's what I wanted to discuss. Thank you. We've got the conditions. We're all very happy with those. No more to add. Thank you all very much for your debate. I'll now ask Mr. Garmer to conduct the vote. So the recommendation is for header plan in the countryside be authorised to grant the application at land south of Tower Works, Lambourne Woodlands, that's application number 22/00897, reserve matters.
So those four, Jen, can you raise your hand and can you hold them up for a bit, okay, so I can make sure that I've got everyone. Sorry, councillor Cole, is that. Sorry.
Halfway.
Okay, those against? And you're abstaining,
Thank you. Therefore, members, that application is granted. Thank you all very much for a very interesting and diverse debate. And thank you very much for our attending. And I close the meeting at 9:40.